We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AV Rant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com. Welcome to another edition of AV Rant. I'm Tom Andrew, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AV Rant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. I watched Eternals. Did not think much of that. It's definitely my least favorite of the Marvel movies. And
I'm gonna go in the exact opposite direction.
You and I apparently have opposite tastes. That's funny.
It is becoming more and more apparent that is true.
Yeah.
I absolutely love that movie.
Oh, okay.
I thought it was phenomenal. I thought it was the lead, but I can understand why you didn't like it, and why many diehard Marvel fans wouldn't like it, because it is the least Marvel movie of any Marvel. Like, the whole Marvel formula of person gets powers, person explores powers, bad guy gets the same powers but bigger, they fight, person with powers wins, roll credits. That is not apparent in this movie. This movie had a completely different feel. Now, I went into this movie with a lot of trepidation.
Okay.
And that's because I was going to watch it with my wife. And for those longtime listeners of the podcast, you know, my wife has a very hard time paying attention to what's happening on the screen, which is it's a hard thing to understand for me, and it's a hard thing for me to say, but she needs to get engaged, and it takes characters for her to get engaged.
Yes.
And I looked at the lineup of the Eternals and went, there is no chance she's keeping these people straight.
Okay.
There's zero chance that's going to happen. Now, I can't tell you that it did happen. I will tell you that she enjoyed the movie, and the reason is because they started small with just Icarus and Cersei.
Yeah.
It kind of built up from there, and they added more characters on so that you could kind of digest what their powers were, what their personalities were, and everything else. And it just had a completely different feel to me than a normal Marvel movie, and that's why I liked it.
Okay.
I thought it was a good departure. I thought it was a great setup for what could potentially be the big bad of the next arc. What the Celestials and everything. So I am. And you know what I really liked? I think what I liked about it more than anything was the fact that Fox thought you couldn't have a humongous humanoid person attack Earth in the form
turned it into a cloud.
Yeah, in turn,
DC did that too.
We can't have this massive humanoid thing attack. No one will believe that. That'll be silly. And then, suddenly this eternal face just shows up in the clouds. Everybody goes,
that part I was fine with.
Well, we're in trouble. I think we're in trouble now. Are we in trouble? I believe maybe we bit off more than we can chew. So, I can understand why you didn't like it, but I mean, unless you want to tell me why you didn't like it.
Well, I mean, I didn't connect to any of the characters, not for lack of wanting to or lack of trying to, but none of the characters I felt a connection to, so that's a problem to me, because I'm like, I want to be emotionally invested, and I just wasn't. I thought the story, it's the book of Genesis, but aliens, so I didn't really feel that there was very much originality or creativity to the story. I'm like, you took a Bible story and you made it aliens instead of God, and I'm like, okay, all right,
I can get behind that.
I guess if you're like, whoa, that's mind blowing, but I found it unoriginal, and then I just felt that on the basic storytelling they failed because it was strange people in a strange world, so there was nothing to connect to. I mean, even though it was supposed to be our world, it was weird. So it didn't work for me on basically any level. So
that's fine. That's fine. Like I said, everybody's going to have their, and it was, I certainly expected it to be a more, based on the reviews and stuff like that, I expected it to be a more divisive Marvel movie. I didn't expect to like it this much.
Okay.
As much as I did. So, and
so that's So I mean, I loved Encanto. You weren't impressed by that, and then you loved Eternals, and I wasn't impressed by
Encanto.
No, I didn't hate Eternals, but all of the Marvel movies to me are entirely watchable. But I will say though, I watched Eternals on Disney Plus, and I thought the sound was lacking. I was not impressed by the sound at all. So
at least that's something they can fix if they just,
that's
if
a technical thing.
You did watch the IMAX version,
yeah.
I assume? Okay.
Yeah.
And if you guys aren't doing that, just know that for all the new Marvel movies that are coming out, before you press play, go down.
Yeah, to the details.
And it'll give you the widescreen. It'll say like versions. It'll give you widescreen and then IMAX, and you want to choose IMAX because that will switch the.
If you have a 16:9 screen, you want the IMAX version.
Which is almost literally everybody. But yes,
but there's
both
some
of you people out there with your 2.35
with the 2.35 to 1, they might want the widescreen version. Yeah. You can tell how Tom feels about that.
I don't know why you would want that. You would want the one that has all the pixels. I mean, we're all complaining about getting all the pixels. And then you're going to not have some pixels because of your stupid screen. But whatever.
So anybody who feels that Tom and I don't disagree enough in our answers, that it's just too much of us repeating each other and saying the same thing in our advice, you got to start asking for movie reviews, and there you'll get the conflict, apparently.
Well, I mean,
we're 12 years into being friends, and this is almost the first time we're truly putting like a pin in it and saying, we definitely differ in our content tastes.
I don't think the last Skywalker or whatever the name of that movie, there was
The Last Jedi or The Rise of Skywalker.
And we disagreed on both those movies.
We flip-flopped.
We flip-flopped completely on those. I loved the first one, and you hated it, and you loved the last one, and I hated it.
Yeah.
Well,
we definitely flip-flopped.
Relatively speaking, I cannot bring myself to watch The Rise of Skywalker again. I tried. I can't do it. I've watched The Last Jedi like 7 times. So I do skip through the part where they go to that stupid planet with the racing and stuff like that. I do skip through that because that's
bad.
That was not. I understand the story from a storytelling perspective, but if you could have just done that with some sort of voiceover, like Harrison Ford voiceover, I would have been okay with that. All right, this is AV Rant, the podcast that just reviews movies way better than that other podcast.
There you go.
In case you're wondering, that's what we're doing.
We don't
from
go
now
minute
on.
by minute. I can't claim that we do that.
We're just going to do it better. Just for this week, it's nothing but reviews.
Gotcha.
We answer your home theater and AV questions. And the reason we don't disagree on our answers is because we follow science, and it's hard. It's hard in the end for us to go, well, But there have been times that we've disagreed. I don't agree necessarily on all your paint color choices.
Sure.
And we have occasionally...
We disagree on seating.
Yeah. For a long time, we disagreed on screen size, screen shape, or aspect ratio. But you've come around to the good side on that one.
You're okay with TV being bigger than movies on a 16:9, and I would still prefer TV to be smaller than movies.
No one's stopping you from zooming it in or out or whatever it's called to make it smaller.
Actually, TV should have a four-way black border option to make a little 16:9 in the middle. Then you can put that 97-inch OLED to use.
I just don't know why you would do that.
If you're worried about burn-in.
It's so silly.
Most of the time, the image is only in the middle, and the whole borders are black. Get some burn-in on that.
After like 3 years of owning your brand, your big 97-inch flat screen, like the outside, the whole outside is brighter than the inside. That's right. What the heck's wrong with your screen? You wouldn't understand. Talk to Rob.
There's a news logo, but it's not in the bottom right corner. It's kind of in the middle bottom right.
It's like 1.5 feet up and in.
Perfect.
All right, AV Rant. We answer your home theater and AV questions. Get your questions answered. All you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. You can go to our website, avrant.com, facebook.com/avrantpodcast, youtube.com/avrant, where you can see our recording sessions. I mean, as we record them. I mean, not as, but what we saw with each other. Even though I don't ever look at Rob, he could probably get stabbed in the face during this podcast, and I wouldn't even know.
I'd have to make a sound. You can hear the sound.
You would, because I'm looking at the questions.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see here. You can contact Rob directly. Rob at avrant.com. His Twitter's at FirstReflect. I'm Tom at avrant.com. My Twitter's at avrant_Tom. I thank our listeners of the week. Listeners of the week is easy for me to say. Become a listener of the week to support the podcast in some way. One of the ways you can do that is going to our website, avrant.com. Click on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link, which is on the right side there, which will send you to a PayPal donation site. So we had 2 users do that listeners do that this month or this week, Jason and Mark. So thank you, Jason. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Mark. That's very nice. PayPal.com. You do not need to have a PayPal account. You can just use a credit card if you'd like to, and we will never see that information. So it's safe as far as we go. So big thanks for the financial support, Jason and Mark.
You could literally email me your credit card and I would probably never see it.
Yeah, we're not the danger as far as that goes.
We are not the Russian hackers you think we are. It's very safe.
Longest con ever. Build up trust for 16 years, run off with one credit card number.
Yes. We're just waiting for that whale to send us this credit card. We want to thank our 136 patrons over at patreon.com. Patreon's a service. We sign up to become a monthly supporter of our podcast. Every month, Patreon will take some money from you and give most of it to us. So we have 136, which is up from last week.
It's ticking back up. Yeah, patreon.com/AVRant podcast. If you would like to sign up for an automatic monthly donation, a big thank you to our 136 patrons over there.
We also got some notes of gratitude for keeping the podcast going during this ongoing, I think it's kind of spiking.
Yeah, hopefully we've reached the peak, at least in North America. We've always got to caveat
America,
that.
I know, I'm sorry. Everybody else in the world, we're very...
Canada's always like a month or two behind the U.S., so...
Hell, it's because you won't let us in to spread it around.
Hey, you're the ones who won't let us in. I always find that...
I don't know why we won't let you in.
Well,
I can understand why we won't let you
You gotta blame
back.
the outsiders.
I'm like, my wife keeps wanting to make plans to travel because we had all kind of plans before the pandemic started to travel, and she wants to make plans to travel. I'm like, we are from Florida. There is a good chance that either they won't let us in or they won't let us out. I don't know which direction it's going to go, but we have to be cognizant of that. Like, I don't even think we can go to New York right now. I don't think New York's going to let us in. I think they're going to take a look at our driver's license and go, no. We'll have to rent a car or something. Anyways, notes of gratitude from Dale, J, Todd, Bret, who says the secret word. And if
from
you don't
way
know
back.
what it is, then you don't know what it is.
He is part of the 2 Hour Plus Club, though. We could say that.
Yeah, you got to be. You had to listen to the very, very end, past the credits of a very old podcast to know the secret word, and Bret knows it. Zach, Augie, JR, and Paul. Now, JR, that brings me back to Who Shot JR, which, if you know that reference, you are old. So, Dale, J, Todd, Bret, Zach, Augie, JR, and Paul. And Paul says that home theater has been his happy place throughout the pandemic. So glad we can help you make that a little bit better.
We can certainly understand that. I'll say the names one more time. Dale, J, Todd, Bret, Zach, Augie, JR, and Paul. Thank you all very much for sending in those notes of gratitude and encouragement. They are definitely appreciated. And a big thank you to everybody who continues to listen.
So let's talk about some news here. And of course, the big news for many people is that the last North American Netflix price increase was in October of 2020. And it's now time for another one because they ain't making enough money. I don't think that company's ever made money. I think they just spend money.
They spend so much money.
Right. So, and, I finally got my wife to start watching Shadow and Bone with me, which is a show I really like. I haven't even gotten through the entire thing because I've been waiting for her to come around to. I've gotten like 6 episodes in, and I really like it, but it's so hard to get her to sit down and watch these things. But I look at some of the stuff they've put out that has big names attached to it, and I'm like, no, you should have hired an editor or you shouldn't have just let people do their own thing for 2.5 hours, because that's not what makes good movies. You need some oversight, and they're not doing that. So, I mean, even some of the more popular ones, I'm like, really? Kind of sucked, especially that Zack Snyder one. Anyways, basic plan, standard definition, one stream goes up $1 from 10 to...
no, it goes from 9 to 10.
I'm sorry. From 9 to 10, but remains at $10 a month in Canada with no increase because of, I don't know.
I guess they just like the way $10 a month looks and didn't want to make it 11 in Canada for some reason.
Right.
Yeah.
The standard plan, high def, 2 streams, goes up $1.50 to $15.50 a month in the US and $16.50 in Canada. And the premium plan, which is ultra high def, 4 stream, goes It goes up $2 to $20 a month in the US and $21 in Canada. The new price is already in effect for new subscribers. Existing subscribers will have their prices go up after 30 days. Yes. So back to my wife. She is finally, the word has finally reached her about Ted Lasso.
Oh, okay.
And now I'm having to have conversations with her about whether or not we should get Apple TV. She's like, it's only $5 a month. Yeah. I'm like,
and there's oodles of ways to get free months of it, but then most of it involves buying something from Apple. But there was also like, if you got an LG TV, you could get 6 months of it, I think, or 3 months of it, 3 months of it, I think. And if you get a PlayStation 5, you can get 6 months of it for free. So,
well, you know, I got the higher the top tier of Netflix so I could get Atmos, and I'm not really getting Atmos.
No, because you have to be connected to a 4K HDR TV to make that work. So I'm definitely going to want to cut down on my my Netflix account. Go down to
I'm
the
just like,
standard
you know what?
tier.
Just drop Netflix for a while, because it's not like I'm not grandfathered in the early price, which was the case for a long time. That if you were an early subscriber, they didn't increase your prices until they did. Yeah. And now we're all at the same thing, which means I could just drop it and then pick it up later.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of considering doing that for a bit. But
that's what I've ended up like. The last time the prices went up and it went to $19 a month for the Ultra HD, the premium tier for me here in Canada, I said, that's just too much. Like with all the other services that I'm paying for as well, I'm like, that's just too much. And now I have resubscribed for a month at a time here or there so I wanted to watch Squid Game, so there, I got it for a month, watched all the Squid Game, watched a few other things too, caught up on the Kevin Smith He-Man series that was not great. But whatever, I was like, I got Netflix for a month, I might as well watch it now. But that's what I'll be doing with them from now on. It's the price is too high for me to keep going forever, and I'm not going to subscribe to just the standard tier for me, because I'm like, what did I buy all these expensive TVs and all of these gazillion speakers for if I'm not going to get the best quality? I really hope they take a page out of every other services book at this point and stop relegating the Ultra HD and HDR and Atmos only to the premium tier. I think that really stinks, because I mean, nobody else does it. Disney Plus doesn't do it, HBO Max doesn't do it, Apple TV Plus doesn't do it. So if they can get rid of that and find a way to, like, I don't need 4 streams, I live alone, I don't need 4 simultaneous streams. So I don't know, give me something in between and maybe I'll resubscribe.
The problem is my different members of my family watch different services. Well,
in yours, it might make sense to have all 4 streams going at some point. So.
We don't, though.
Oh, okay.
We don't. We all sit in the same room and watch them, but at different times. So I got one son who watches mostly Disney.
Yeah.
I've got another son who watches mostly Netflix.
Okay.
And then I watch, pretty much all of it, but my wife watches Hulu more than anything, and then Amazon Prime is just there because we want the free shipping.
Sure.
Anyways.
Yeah.
All right, NVidia Shield has been updated to Android TV 11, and if you're a bit of a power user on the video streaming side of things, particularly with Plex, you'll probably want to avoid doing the upgrade until some things get sorted out. It's just a bunch of people who just broke out into a sweat. Just happened as they're listening to this podcast.
Yeah.
First of all, the update to Android TV 11 does not mean the Shield is finally getting a 4K menu and automatic frame rate switching. Those features are part of Android TV 12. So, not yet. Which Google has made available to developers late last year, so this is still a version behind. Second, a lot of the focus on Android TV 11 update is on the gaming side of things. It makes the Shield the only set-top device capable of 4K HDR GeForce Now game streaming. GeForce Now is a thing, I guess.
Yeah.
And it improves controller and keyboard support. There are benefits to some video streaming apps, though, including the Google Play Store, which now can support Dolby Vision, and to the Apple TV app, which now supports Dolby Vision and Dolby Atmos. But it's not all good news, and shout out to John on Twitter for the heads up. Users have reported video playback problems with Netflix, Disney Plus, and HBO Max. A factory reset of the Shield are completely wiping all cache and local app data, and then reinstalling those apps seems to get them working again, which people love to do.
Oh, I know.
Nothing makes
so
people
convenient?
happier than nothing makes you happier than deleting everything and hoping you can remember your passwords.
And Netflix, Disney Plus, and HBO Max, I mean, just little services. Hardly anybody uses those.
No. I will say that some of these services are getting better and better about not making you remember your password. Like if you signed up on a computer or a phone or something, you can just go to that other device and it'll register your whatever console. Disney Plus, I don't think does that yet. I think you still have to remember your stupid password, which is annoying.
I don't know.
Plex has the it's because you don't change as many devices as I have to. Plex has the biggest problems, though, particularly if you're using the Shield Pro as your Plex server. Android TV 11 changes the way external storage is handled, which breaks existing Plex server libraries. That's very convenient. Yeah. Again, a full factory reset and rebuilding your Plex server from scratch seems to work, but that can be an enormous hassle for people with large Plex libraries. Plex has said they're aware of the issue, but there's no timeline for when or if an app update can fix the problem. So, somebody on the programming side said, we should do this a little bit differently. It would be a little bit more efficient. It'll be a little bit more convenient. And everybody went, I can't see any problem with that.
Yeah.
Boom.
I mean, it is Google. So, Android TV 12, which already exists, probably changes it back or something. It wouldn't surprise me whatsoever.
So another week, another Monoprice Monolith product page up added, but this time it's on the smaller end. The Monolith M518HT THX Certified 5.1 Sub SAT system includes a ported downward firing 8-inch sub plus 5 identical satellite speakers for $800. The Monolith THX 8-inch sub and additional pairs of the Monolith THX satellite speakers are available separately for $350 and $250 respectively. So the satellite speakers, that's a pair for $250.
The pair is $250, and the 8-inch sub, which I'm showing on YouTube right now, that is $350. 8-inch THX certified.
Details and specs haven't been listed yet, and the expected shipping date is shown as the end of February. They've listed as THX certified, but the certification level isn't specified. I would guess select would be my guess off the top of my head.
But
yeah. So it might be a compact tier meant for rooms under 2,000 cubic feet with a listing distance of 8 feet.
Yeah, because there is THX compact now, and then THX select, and then THX compact ultra, and then THX dominus for over 6,500 cubic feet.
Yeah. I don't know. From the photos, we can see that the 8-inch sub offers fully variable phase, as well as a couple of output curve options. The satellites appear to be a coaxial design with maybe a 4-inch driver. Just eyeballing the size, which is really hard to do from pictures because there's nothing. They
it might be 3.5. It might be 4. I don't think it's larger than 4. I don't think it's smaller than 3.5. But that's just eyeballing it.
So you have the recessed spring post and a keyhole mount for on the back for easy wall mounting. I would guess they'd have to go for select. I don't think you can go for compact and call them really home theater. I mean, you can.
It's just the size of them. I'm like, I don't know if that's going to reach select or not, but the price suggests it would be select. So anyway, we'll find out once these things are fully official, but
$800.
Yeah.
So and that's a good entry-level system.
If these compact speakers are compact enough, they might be the new Focal little birds,
Right. 250 is 125 a pop.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not bad. That's about the same thing as an NHTs.
Exactly. So I have some hopes on that front. And honestly, the $800.
I'll see if I can get some in for a review. I'll ask. I'll reach out now.
Yeah, the $800 price for the 5.1 package, that ain't bad for that. That's pretty good.
Got some comments here from our listeners. Augie recalls that his previous projectors would keep their cooling fan running for quite a while after the projector was turned off. So he totally understands why having them plugged into a battery backup would have been a good idea. But with his newest projector, an Epson 5050UB, its cooling fan seems to stop immediately when the projector is turned off, so maybe battery backup isn't necessary anymore? He wouldn't want to see people being scared away from a projector setup due to the added cost and complexity of worrying about battery backup. There is no added cost or complexity, I think. Well, it costs, but not that much cost, and the complexity is, you still have to run power to the projector somehow.
Yeah.
It's not, you're just, if you did nothing but put a battery backup between its power plug and the outlet in which you are going to power it by.
Like if it's a rear shelf mount, you very well might just do that. And if you were going to add an outlet to your ceiling anyway, then we're saying instead of running that wire back to the panel, run it back to the location of the rest of your equipment. So
I'll tell you, in my room, especially because it's a small room and I have oodles of insulation in here, and I live in Florida where it's almost exclusively hot all the time, even though today it is cooler. My fan goes for a while afterwards.
I'm not sure. I haven't owned a 5050UB. I've seen one in action, but I haven't owned it. I don't know. I'm not going to doubt him if he says it stops. Okay, but there's the chance that maybe it just goes into like a lower mode, like you don't hear it anymore, so it's not audible, but maybe it's still spinning. I don't know about that. With the new models that are switching over to laser light sources instead of lamps, it very well might be the case that they don't need any cooling after the power has been switched off. So, he's got a point. At the same time, I don't think anyone who was willing to go to a projector installation is going to find the addition of a battery backup to be the thing that says, oh, I was going to do it, but now I'm not. Like, I don't really think that's the thing that's going to stop them. So
$250 for a battery backup for my $7,000 projector.
Right.
I'm drawing the line there.
Yeah. But in any case, yeah, that's fine.
All right. Yeah. And honestly, peace of mind, I think, is worth to the price of the
I got battery backups on everything in my place. I'd love having, other than like my stove. I don't have a battery backup for that. But.
Oh yeah, so I had my cable guy. Remember I talked last week about the cable being out and everything else, right? So I have a battery backup for everything that's up there, so my cable doesn't go out. And because it's the only exterior line that comes into the house, and then I have a wire that runs from there all the way to my home theater, so everything in my home theater is hardwired. I have the cable line that's coming from outside. The
coax cable,
right, going into the battery backup, back out again. And the guy, I could hear the guy, he was on the phone with his supervisor, and he was like, he's got it plugged into some surge protector thingy up here, and he's like, no, we don't do that, get rid of that, blah, blah, blah. So they unplugged it and they got rid of it. And I had to go, and then once they left, I had to go back up there. He actually stole my freaking cable too. I was so mad. The little jumper cable. Yeah. So when they sent the second guy out before he left, I was like, before you leave, do not leave until I talk to you. And he was like, I'm done. I'm leaving. I said, okay, can you just cut me like a 3-foot jumper cable real quick? And he's like, yeah, no problem. And he asked me what it was for, and I just went back up there and plugged it in. Yeah, because that is the path that the lightning bolt is going to take to come into my home theater. There is everything else is plugged into a surge protector or a battery backup, or everything else is except for the subwoofers is plugged into one of those things, and then there's this Ethernet cable that comes all the way from my router. All the way around the house, because it's only I actually have it routed outside, all the way into the home theater, and I'm just like, I'm not going to have that be the reason everything in my theater gets self-destructed. So, I just went up there and plugged it back in, no problems. I mean, so just if you have somebody come out there and work on your house, double check what they have done, because they will do stuff like that because what they're worried about is signal loss.
Of course, yeah.
And what they don't want is you to call them up and say, I can't get channel whatever anymore, and I used to be able to get it, and it's because you plugged it into a surge protector which has enough signal loss, just enough to kick off whatever it was that you were looking at. All right, questions. Brad, my kid has been singing because he was in drama, and they did a performance, and there was another group that was singing a song from Rocky Horror Picture Show. So I've got Brad on the brain now. So sorry, Brad. When Brad informed us that he had taken down the partition wall in his converted garage, we said that larger volume and air would mean he needs bigger subwoofers than we originally talked about. It sounds like us. It's like something we would say.
It's a significant amount of extra volume of air. So
yeah, he went from 15 feet to 30 feet, if I remember correctly.
Like 12 feet to 30 feet. Yeah.
Oh, even worse. So the space is now roughly 10.5 by 30 instead of only being 12 feet long when the partition wall was still up. He'll be sitting 9 feet from the front wall, so he'll have about 21 feet of space behind him. He already has a pair of SVS PB1000 Pro subs. Will they be sufficient? At least they're ported.
Yep. And PB1000 Pros, I mean, they have the same output as what, like the old, certainly the PB12 NSDs, maybe pretty close to the PB2000s, not the 2000 Pros, but the 2000s. It's pretty close in that output. Because the room is so narrow and it's not particularly tall, I think you're still fine. You're still within the cubic footage.
Think so.
These would be fine.
Just remember, you want them, basically across from each other at that 15-foot mark.
That's going to be the next question. I think, the next question coming up is placement. But, in terms of raw output, I think you're fine.
Yeah, okay. So if you had said the SB, I would have said you were in trouble.
Yeah.
The PB1000, in my mind, just from thinking about the volume of air you're looking at and the size of those subs and how much output I know that they can do based on my own experience with the PB1000 before.
Right.
Before the Pro
but you got to remember the PB1000 Pro went to the 12-inch driver. It's not the 10-inch driver anymore. It's substantially more output than the PB1000 was.
I would say, you're kind of on that upper range of what the sub can do. But I mean, if you have them where I'm telling you to put them, they're almost basically co-located anyway, so that's pretty close. Thinking he'd like to put one sub in the front corner and the second sub equal distant behind him, so about 9 feet in front of his seats and 9 feet behind his seats diagonally opposite. Will that work? Yeah, I mean, you can physically put them there. I mean, They will not drop into a hole, into some sort of abyss, but it is the wrong place for them. It's either...
Mathematically speaking, you're not making your life as easy as it could possibly be in terms of placement. Certainly wouldn't say that it's impossible to get that to work. You've got the fully variable phase and all the adjustments that you can do through the app. So it's doable if that is truly where they physically fit the best. I'm not going to tell you no, but... if you want mathematically the best place to put them, it would be, if the room is 30 feet long, it would be 15 feet along each side wall. So they'd be, right in the smack dab in the middle of the two long walls. Or, I mean, you could put it smack dab in the middle of the front wall and smack dab in the middle of the back wall.
Or in the front left corner, back right corner. But I know you don't want to do that. I mean,
it doesn't really seem so. I mean, he's got all those doors back there that make the rear corners kind of a no-go for putting any subs back there. So, I mean, to me, the easiest is the dead smack middles of the two side walls, which... I mean, it does look like he can do it. It'll be like right behind sort of the step threshold, looking backwards. There's the little step that is the main door into the house. It'd be like either on that step or right behind it would be like the middle, and then directly across from it on the other side.
Oh, I can't tell based on these pictures, but yeah. So if you are like, no, I can't do that, and then and I have to put them in these places. Yeah. Well, you've got Rob's 12-step guide that will help you. You might be a candidate for somebody who's going to get RoomEQ Wizard, a calibrated UMIC 1 from Cross Spectrum Labs, and then use the what is it called, the whatever program it is that helps you set up multiple subs.
Well, the multi-sub optimizer software doesn't really do its best with only two. You can try it with only two, but it's really meant for 3 or 4. That's where it does its advantages. So, and also Brad's whole thing was to try and not get too mired in perfectionism anymore, because that's what stopped him from even making the home theater he had planned like years ago. So I would say plop him down. He's not going to have very many seats. Just listen to some bass sweeps in your seats, and once
use Rob's guide is fine for doing that.
Uniform.
With his 12-step guide, it does kind of talk about not having the subs in the optimal locations. But that being said, if you're really going for easy, and I had this conversation with Andrew this week, because Andrew's receiver died, so he ordered a new one, and then the new one was going to have DRAC, and he was like, maybe I should get a microphone and do this. I'm like, you can. I wouldn't, and the reason is because you're never going to do it. I mean, you might do it once. You might go through the whole process of running DRAC and getting the mic and doing all the stuff and RoomEQ Wizard and all this stuff. You might do it once, but you're not going to want to keep doing it over and over and over again.
I mean, probably not over and over. Having a UMIC 1 on hand, that's not a bad thing. I don't know
honestly,
too many people who are
those things
regretful.
are supposed to be recalibrated every year. I mean,
ideally, sure.
Yeah, they should be recalibrated every year. So at some point, you just tell yourself it's probably not calibrated anymore, and then you don't even want to use it, or you're like, I have to send it back to Cross Spectrum Labs, which would be fine. They'll recalibrate it for you. But, it's just so much easier to look at your room and go, it is a rectangle. These are my options. Make it work. Instead of trying to sit there and futz with sweeps and everything else. And then you're going for ease of use, Brad, right? Yeah. You're going for just ease of setup. Ease of setup get a broom, sweep out the locations 15 feet in your side walls, and don't put anything else there, and then plop your subwoofers down and call it good.
And I know
that's ease of use.
I know it's unintuitive because people will say, wait a second, both subs 15 feet along the sidewall. I'm only sitting 9 feet into this room. So that means both of my subs are behind me. Yep, both of the subs are behind you. And I know it's unintuitive. And I know because for the rest of your speakers, no, you wouldn't put your front left and right speakers 9 feet behind you. That doesn't make any sense. Or 6 feet behind you. You know, you wouldn't do that with those speakers, but they're directional. Your subwoofers are not. And the space, the air does not care where the subwoofers are, and all the air in that room is moving along with those subwoofers and faster than, you know, you'd ever be able to tell within the dimensions of the room. So I know it's unintuitive. It doesn't feel like it makes sense to have both subs positioned behind you, but that is mathematically where they should go.
And I know, you know, sometimes, you know, just to think about it for a second, a 20 hertz wave is like 55 feet long. To make one wave. I mean, in order to push in your eardrum and back out again, it's got to travel 55 feet to do that, which means you'll hear the first wave you may hear is going to come off your back wall or
probably one of the side walls in this case.
No, it's gonna come it's gonna bounce around the room a whole bunch. So it doesn't matter that they're 15 feet behind you because they're filling the entire space up with sound waves, just like filling it up with water. Zach was thankful to Jason for commenting last week that his Denon X4300H is able to pass through Dolby Vision from his NVIDIA Shield. Zach thinks we're probably right that it's a firmware update that's needed. But unfortunately, the network connection on his unit stopped working some time ago, and since he's out of warranty, a local repair shop wanted $300 just to look at it. He tried downloading the firmware onto a USB stick. I think didn't we talk about this last week? But when he tried to update the firmware that way, it gave him an error saying he needs a network connection, which of course is ludicrous because if he had network connections, then he wouldn't need the USB thing. So any ideas? I mean, other than calling Denon and saying, like, dude, WTH. like you got me in the catch-22 here, buddy. You know, you got me in a circular logical loop I can't escape from. You gotta tell me how I can force this thing to update from the firmware. And if there's not some way to do it, I mean, they gotta do something.
And sadly, the end of the story as of now, because I emailed Zach the links that I'm about to mention because I wanted to let him have it a try as soon as possible. It was just a couple of links to email to him, and he tried the instructions in both of these links and it did not work. Unfortunately, the first one we were both very hopeful about because there's actually a mention of this specific model year and saying there actually was a firmware update along the way, not the newest one, but there was an update along the way that made the networking connection stop working, and that this was a procedure to actually roll back the firmware. And we were like, that sounds like that's what it is. He tried the whole procedure and it wouldn't complete. It wouldn't allow him to roll the firmware back. It just stopped. And he's like, he even left it for just like overnight to see if it would progress super slowly or something. And nope. Thankfully, it didn't completely brick the unit and turn it unusable, but it did not work. And then the other one was just instructions for how to do the update over USB. But yeah, no dice on that one either. So at this point, I don't have any other information. I don't know where else to turn. I agree with Tom. It's time to call Denon's own technical support, but I don't really foresee them having instructions beyond the support that I found, but it's certainly worth a try. A phone call or an email is worth a try because I don't have any further info.
It's very strange that the network, because it has an Ethernet
It has
port,
an Ethernet port.
Plus it has wireless
Plus it has
as
Wi-Fi.
well.
That's right.
And that's surprising that both of them would be broken, that not one of them would be not broken. But
I mean, on the chance he hasn't tried the Ethernet, the hardwired connection, if he's only been trying Wi-Fi, definitely find a way to plug it in hardwired, but I think he did. So in any event,
I would assume that you have, but if you haven't, yes,
certainly
you absolutely need to,
Unfortunately, I don't have further information, and definitely email or call Denon. If they can't do anything, then I mean, he's like, at some point I'm going to upgrade my AV receiver, so I guess we're waiting till then. I don't know what else. Sorry.
Jason is using a Denon S900W receiver, and when he starts or stops a game or streaming app on his Xbox Series X, there's a pop sound, and it's quite loud. The speakers are Ascend CR2s, so he's a little bit worried about potentially damaging them. He also heard the same pop when using Room and Hue Wizard, but his PS5 doesn't ever seem to cause a pop. Is there a cause for concern? should be. It's like a soft clipping thing, isn't it? That's when.
Or it's just when it switches decoders, like doing it through RumiQ Wizard. It's switching between the. I'm assuming he's doing it like with the ASIO drivers, so it's switching between Windows typical stereo output versus the multi-channel PCM output, and it's switching the drivers there. And it's like I've had this happen with things other than these devices, where you switch a listening mode and there's that weird pop that it makes, or sometimes even like when you first turn something on or when you turn it off.
But that pop usually isn't volume dependent. Like it's not dependent on how loud you have and the volume knob.
He didn't say that it was. It's just that the pop, when there is a pop, is quite loud. Now the thing is, if you describe the pop that it's making as quite loud, I'm not worried about the speakers being damaged by that, because they're making sounds way louder than that all the time, and a pop sound is not going to damage anything. If you were like, it is shockingly, frighteningly loud, then I'd be like, okay, maybe that's a cause for concern. But if you're like, it's quite loud, quite loud, I'm not worried about that. There's plenty of other sounds that the speaker's making. Then that's
the thing about tweeters. As somebody who has blown one before, the thing about tweeters is that there is no mistaking the difference between quite loud and I'm going to damage my speaker, because there's a very little room for error between those two things. Because I played the sweep and it went zzz, and I was like jumping for the remote trying to get it, and it just went pop. And I mean, and that pop, it sounded like
a gunshot pop.
It was not. There was very little mistaking what had happened. So annoying, yes. And this, I mean, the S900 is basically entry level, right around that entry level.
I know it'd be like one or two steps above entry level, but it's still the S series, not the X series. And W means we're going back several years, because it was before HEOS.
So unfortunately, it's kind of the corners cut in the at least in my mind, the corners cut in some of these lower priced receivers, where
when it switches decoders.
It's just they just don't have the money or whatever, the ability to put those functionalities in there that you will get on a higher price receiver. So
I wouldn't say it's even that. I've heard it with pretty much all levels of receivers. Sometimes it's coming from the source. The PS5 wouldn't do it because it doesn't change sound modes. It's just outputting multi-channel PCM at all times, no matter what you're listening to. So I honestly, Jason, I don't think it's a cause for concern. I don't think you're in danger of damaging your speakers with what you've described. I know the sort of sound you're describing, and it's not. It isn't a great sound. I agree with you there, but it's not a sound that would damage a speaker.
My Denon doesn't do it, and I have an Xbox Series X, and I've never had this issue. So I mean, I would guess it was the receiver, and if you upgrade, when you do upgrade, I would imagine it's going to go away. I can't promise, but I would not be surprised if it went away, especially if you get one that has a little bit better room correction, which means that it's got to have better everything else too. Bill is quite happy after his last home theater updates. He expanded to a 7.2.6 configuration, installed new carpet, got new Monoprice theater recliners with a riser for the back row, and painted the room. I know this room is not blue, but it does look blue from this picture. So
I don't know what I'm looking at on my computer screen, whether those colors are anywhere close to accurate. So I'm not sure. But the ceiling looks white. It might be gray, but it looks white in the photo. The floor
is like beige, maybe.
Yeah,
I would guess
like
beige.
White. I'm not entirely sure. And then the walls are some kind of dark color, maybe bluish, maybe grayish. I can't quite tell on my computer.
I do have a question for you, Bill, and that is, the foosball table, does it rattle when the bass hits? Because I would guess it would.
Very possibly.
And I would be surprised if it didn't. So, and if not, then I think you need to turn the bass up. The room is still pretty bright during the day. Bill typically watches movies at night, but the room does get used during the day. He tends to put up some blackout curtains, but a little bit of light is still going to leak in, and the ceiling and floor will remain light color. So as we can see in his image, his current display looks small. It's a 65-inch OLED. The image quality is excellent, but he wants a much bigger image now. It's ideally around 120 inches. Again, I have an article that says just because your wall is big enough to support it doesn't mean that you should buy it.
But I don't think he's wrong.
I don't know how far away you're sitting. Yeah, it's very hard to tell from images like this that are shot in the back corner. And I can't tell you how many fisheye lenses I've seen on images on Reddit, and people say, "Are these the right place for my speakers?" I'm like, dude, Can't even tell if they're rectangular or not.
But I don't think anyone would argue that the 65-inch TV in this setup looks a little bit small. We all agree on that.
I agree on that. So he's fine with modifying the entertainment shelving units up front. He's picturing a screen that fills the entire width between the sliding barn-style doors, but he would keep the speakers behind the screen, so it would need to be acoustically transparent. He suggested a motorized screen that would come down in front of the whole setup, but his wife vetoed that completely. I would like your wife to talk to my wife, because my wife will tell your wife that that's a fantastic idea. But
not only that, there's a solution that neither of you might have been aware of that might make that roll down screen a new possibility. But we'll get to that in a moment.
Okay, we'll get to that soon. Mm-hmm. So since any projection setup that he does install will end up being the only display, he's concerned about daytime viewing conditions. It seems like an ultra short throw projector with an ambient light rejecting screen might be a solution, but they wouldn't with the projector sticking out in front below the screen. He's seen in the manuals it's physically possible to put the UST, the ultra short throw projector, on the ceiling, but would the specialized ALR, ambient light rejecting UST, ultra short throw screen still work? Turn it upside down, my dude. But yes, it seems like that would be a problem, since any light from above would now be directed at the viewers instead of projected. So is there any good solution for this, acoustically transparent and usable during the day? I'm interested to see what Rob's solution is here.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know how much space there is behind those doors, because I kind of feel like you could just mount a screen there and then, behind the doors, and then the doors open up and reveal the screen, and then you close the doors. You could just put a fixed frame screen back there, which would be cheaper anyways. That being said, we used to have a...
Well, I mean, that is actually what he's kind of talking about, because what got vetoed was a roll-down screen. So he is talking about putting a screen, like, over what we can see as the TV and front speakers. I don't know if he's planning to have those barn-style doors still be able to close over the screen. But he is talking about
that's
fixed
120
frame.
Inches, though. Like,
I don't know. I'll just go by that he's measured it. He said that's what fits, door to door when the doors are open. So...
Okay.
On that front,
that doesn't look like 120. But,
I don't know. We are looking at a non-linear lens of the photo. So you know what? Let's go to what I was talking about before first that I alluded to, which is that there are roll down screens that are fully recessed into the ceiling. So
that's true.
I'm showing an image of like Elite Screens has an option. Let's see, it's the Evidence in-ceiling screen, and they do have it as an acoustically transparent version with the one acoustically transparent fabric that I like from Elite Screens, which is the Acoustic Pro UHD. But this one, and I'm just sort of showing the images that they had, when it rolls up and closes and on a white ceiling, it's gone. Like, there's nothing hanging down at all. It's recessed into the ceiling. So it's like truly invisible once that screen is rolled up.
But that's very determined on the direction of your ceiling joist.
But his room is longer than wide, and typically when the room is longer than wide, the joists are running side to side. I mean, I can't guarantee it. But that's... you would want to check on that for sure, because the joists in this room need to be running side to side, not front to back, in order to install a recessed in-ceiling screen like this. But assuming that typical construction was used and that is the direction that the joists are going in your ceiling, if you weren't aware of these recessed in-ceiling options, I'm like, if it was because she doesn't want something visible hanging down from the ceiling, which I can totally appreciate, this could definitely be a solution. And now you wouldn't have to get rid of the flat panel. You can continue to use the flat panel during the day. At night when it's dark, the screen, comes down out of the ceiling, and you can have that experience without having to need an ambient light rejecting screen, which the Elite Screens versions are not. Illusion Vision also has an audio weave, acoustically transparent, available in this completely recessed in-ceiling installation as well. So that's another option. So there's Elite Screens, Illusion Vision. A lot of the screen manufacturers have them too. Stewart certainly does. Screen Innovation certainly does if you want to go to the higher end. Now, if all of that is out and you're just like, nope, it's going to be one projection screen, I want to be able to use it during the day, but it also has to be acoustically transparent, Illusion Vision is one of the few that has an offering. Again, this is their, let's see, they've got two. They've got their Aurora 4K ambient light rejecting, and it's perforated. So the perforations is the way that they get the acoustically transparent. They also have their Aurora Evo 8K perforated. Now, both of those are ambient light rejecting screens. They are not ultra short throw ambient light rejecting. They are regular ambient light rejecting, so those would require you to have a normal projector, use a normal projector.
Right. Which, if you didn't want a screen hanging from your ceiling, I don't know that you want a projector hanging from your ceiling, but you're going to end up with that anyway.
Yeah, pretty much. Now, I agree that like having the ultra short throw projector on a little stand out in front of all of this in your room, if it was aesthetics keeping the body of a roll down screen, then that's not going to look good in here. And I agree with your take that yes, it is physically possible to mount an ultra short throw projector on the ceiling upside down, but then it does defeat the way that the ambient light rejecting screens work, which, I mean, it would reject light from the floor, but how much is that going to be the source of your light is coming? I think that white ceiling is going to reflect more of the light, and more of the light is going to be coming from above. So if it turns out that the recessed in-ceiling screen is a go, and the only place you're willing to put a projector is on the ceiling ultra short throw, you can do that with a standard white screen. That'll still function just fine. It just won't be ambient light rejecting. That's all. But like I say, if you've got the recessed in-ceiling screen that can come down in front of this whole setup, well, then you can just have a white screen because you're only going to be using it at night when it's dark or when the blackout curtains are drawn. So to me, a lot of this hinges on getting the okay for that recessed in-ceiling screen, and let's hope that the joists are the way that I think they are, which should be the case, but you definitely want to check on that.
All right, let me make my suggestion then. So I agree with Rob that the ambient light rejecting screen, I generally don't like them just on the face because I feel like they are a compromise that is not always very good. But that being said, I feel like there's a solution in here that's even better, not necessarily better, but that might tick all the boxes that you might want.
Okay.
And that is a regular, if you cannot do the recessed drop-down screen, you get a normal drop-down screen, tab tension, the whole thing, that just hangs from the ceiling. They don't hang that far down, a couple of, maybe 6 inches,
and you can get
inches.
them with white or decorative cases. It doesn't have to be a black case.
But I don't even think you need that. What I think that you do is that right now at the front of your room where your doors close, there is this big, long, white board that your door thingies are hanging from. You just basically mount another board, like you can call it board or a piece of trim that goes all the way across the front of your room.
In front of
That's in front of it, and you paint it blue or whatever the color of these stupid walls are, right?
Or white to match the trim that's already there.
You could. And then you basically just mount the screen behind it.
Right.
Now, you could build a box, a lower part so that it's not just a piece of wood hanging down so that it's all sort of encased in there. Again, you could use Rob's recessed screen to do this to make it even cleaner look, but you wouldn't have to. It's just basically you're just creating a valence that's just gonna hide all this. All of it you can do it all the way across the front so that it's a nice seamless look, and then the screen is basically gone. So you could use the screen that Rob's suggesting. You use a cheaper screen, which because those recessed ones, those flush mounted ones, tend to be more expensive than just like the ones that come in their own little stupid black or white case.
And the installation of the recessed ones certainly is more involved because you're not just hanging it from the ceiling or a wall. You are having to cut a hole in the ceiling and recess it into the ceiling. So it's definitely more involved to install it.
And then you're done. You're good. You're good at that. And that way you have, you still have that. The sight line is still pristine or clean. You, like Rob said, you can paint it white. I think you should paint it the same color as the rest of the walls, but you guys decide on that.
You can paint it whatever you want.
And then you just go with a regular screen.
Yeah.
And it drops down, like you said, during the day. You watch the thing. So I think that there's a couple of options here you can go with.
Yeah.
I made your picture bigger, Rob, so I can see the dang
The one thing I don't have in mind is ambient light rejecting ultra short throw acoustically transparent. I'm not able to come up with a solution that checks all three of those boxes.
Right.
So I could do ambient light rejecting ultra short throw, but then I wouldn't want to turn it upside down. And I could do ambient light rejecting and acoustically transparent, but not ultra short throw. So you could use it with a regular projector. Regular projector could work with that. But yeah, there we go. But I would find a way to get that motorized screen in there, recessed or with trim hiding it like Tom just suggested, and use it at night and continue using the flat panel during the day.
Monty is finalizing his plans for the theater room in his new house. It's a perfect rectangle, about 15 by 20 by 9, and fully carpeted with a thick pad underneath. He'll be using the front half of the room for his theater setup, and he'll have the open back shelves at the back for his room for Lego sets and collectibles. He might put a foosball table in the rear half of the room if it fits comfortably. All right, talk to Bill or Bob or whatever his name is and find
Make
out
sure it doesn't rattle.
Let us know whether that thing rattles. He's never had a dedicated treated room before, so he wrote Gick, and they replied with a whole bunch of advice. He'd like some help sorting through that, plus some other ideas. So the back of your room is going to be all the... And if you look at these models, that if you can see them online, they're Lego. I think they're all Legos. Are they all Legos? I think they are.
Almost and Star Wars. Actually, I'm not entirely sure if he said this was his current collection, but in any case, this is an idea of what he's going for.
Okay. So, it's just regular shelves with a bunch of Lego models built on them. So, blah, blah, blah. I'm looking at this. So the door is in the rear left.
So it's on the left wall towards the back of the room.
Back. Yeah. It would be, yes. So it looks like he has his seats just in front of the halfway mark with, basically a 5.1 setup with a subset in the correct place on the side walls, which looks good. There may be a window. No, I don't know why that...
Yeah, it kind of looks like a window on the front wall. I think that's what's going on there. Window on the front wall behind the TV.
Yeah, and he's got some acoustic panels put in here. Looks like he's got tri-traps in all four corners. And he's got treatments on his side walls, kind of catching the first reflection, and then treatments on the back wall, catching the slap echo.
Yeah.
So there he goes. Gick basically went in order of importance in the reply. They said the first thing that treated the corners as thick as possible. So soffit traps with flex range membranes if possible. What is the flex range? What is that?
So that's the semi-permeable membrane that it actually reflects the high frequencies a bit more, but it's a little bit of a tuned bass trap, so it gets it even lower. So it's all about more bass, less treble.
Okay. If those are too big or too expensive, consider tri-traps or corner alpha traps if he wants the look of diffusion panels on the fronts, or just regular bass trap panels straddling the corners. What do we think? And do the corner bass traps need to go wall to ceiling?
Or I guess that should be floor to ceiling. Sorry.
Floor to ceiling. That's all right. Do they need to? No, but it would be nice if they did. I've never owned a house that I could stack the tri-traps on top of each other and have them fit. My rooms have been too short in every case. Because they're a little bit bigger than 4 feet, or maybe with drywall, the 8-foot ceiling is a little bit less than 8 feet. But you have 9 feet, so I would stack them. I would 100% stack them in here.
I mean, like the basic advice that they gave you, I completely agree with. You definitely do want to treat the corners. You definitely want to go as thick as you possibly can. I'm wondering, though, I don't know your level of do-it-yourself comfortableness, because if you can just make
this yourself,
if you can just make the super chunks, which is not that difficult. The hardest part of the super chunks is whatever finish you want to put on front of them and make it look nice.
That is the
part,
yes.
Just cutting the insulation, anybody can do that, or you can hire a handy person to do it for very cheap, because you're literally just taking 2 foot by 4 foot. You want to go for the 24-inch on center if you're doing these 24-inch on center bats of insulation. So it'll be like 2 feet by 4 feet, and you just cut them in half across to make squares, and then you cut them diagonally to make triangles, and then you just stack those triangles in your corners, and so it's just loose insulation cut into triangles, stacked in the corners. That part's very easy. It's just whatever finish you want to put in front. Some people make sort of a loose frame that they can remove, and they have, speaker grill cloth or acoustically transparent fabric on the front of that. Some people build a whole, sort of trim frame on the walls themselves, and again, it'll be stretched fabric over that so that it's acoustically transparent. But this is a very DIY-friendly project, is corner bass traps, and the super chunks are very effective because they are very thick, but they're easy. They're not crazy expensive. It's less expensive them buying tri-traps or soffit traps from Gick. And, so that I would nudge you towards that way. Again, if you don't want to do it yourself, this is something a handyman can do. So.
Yeah, and you might look at at least compare the cost of having somebody do that for you. I don't really see any, like, you're not putting so much absorption in here that you need to have diffusion on these things. I don't think you need to pay extra for that.
And it was interesting because, I mean, Gick mentioned their panels that have the diffusion built in it, but they all along, they primarily mentioned them as if you just like the look, which is totally valid. I'm on board with that, because some people are like, I don't like the just plain fabric look. I'd like it to have some visual interest. And like, hey, we've got these Alpha and Impression series panels. They're marketed as diffusion panels, but they talked it up mostly for the looks. And I got no beef with that. And again, if you want to have either a handyman create something visually interesting, just a little piece of MDF with some shapes cut out of it, or if you want to get those things for the fences that they sell at Home Depot that are 2 feet by 4 feet, you can get those and just put them on the front. So yeah, that's all totally doable. But yeah, to me, the corner trapping is one where I'm like, DIY makes a ton of sense to me, just from a cost and a performance perspective, because that's nice, thick, lots of insulation.
And you can just, I mean, and we talk about DIY traps all the time around here, and I've built them, and I'm not handy. Andrew's built them, and he's more handy than I am, so his look a little bit better. But yeah, and if you like, I don't know how to do all this, and I'm not really sure, you can just build regular traps and just straddle the corner.
Them across the corners.
You could do it that way as well. Yeah. It won't look as nice, but it will work just fine. Mm-hmm. So there are a bunch of options here. Now, I have no problems with you just going, I don't want to do any of that. Mm-hmm. That sounds like a lot of work, and I don't want to pay anybody else to do it because it sounds like a lot of work to even figure out who I'm going to pay. I just want to buy the traps. Get the tri-traps. Just
those. I mean, those are the easiest ones to just fit into your corner. I agree with Gick. If you can afford the soffit traps, I'm all for it, because the thicker the better. But honestly, to me, if I'm buying panels, like over at Acoustimac, they sell ones where they've beveled the edges. So it's not a full tri-trap. It's a rectangular trap, but they've beveled the edges so that it fits into the 45-degree angles of the corners, and it looks like it fits in just like a tri-trap. So I would consider Acoustimacs as well. But go as thick as you can. If you're getting the corner traps from Acoustimac, get the 6-inch thickness ones. I know it costs a bit more, but these are for bass. This is all about bass, and you've got to go as thick as you possibly can. So don't skimp on these.
How low can you go?
Yeah, don't do the 4-inch traps for this. The whole point of doing this is to get as thick as you can. So get the 6-inch traps if you do.
All right, now, and yes, floor to ceiling if possible.
If possible, if not, that's also fine. We're just trying to cover as much surface area as we're able to. That's all.
So next, Gick said to treat the side walls at the first reflection points, again, as thick as he can reasonably manage, and they actually suggested just basic full-range panels, unless he wants the look of diffusion plates on top. After that, they suggested the ceiling, also at the first reflection points, same panels as the side walls. Monty was thinking 4-inch panels. Any reason to favor Gick panels over Acoustimac or vice versa? Does he really need to treat the ceiling? Could he try things without that first? You do not have to ask us permission to try something without something else first. You can always try something and then change your mind later. I have very rarely, and Rob knows this, and I've talked about it a bunch, I very rarely suggest people treat the ceiling, not because it doesn't do anything, but mostly because I feel like I will put people off of doing anything if I suggest that they have to do the ceiling in order for it to work. They'll just be like, well, if I got to do the ceiling, I ain't doing none of it. Mm-hmm. I think where you have the first reflection points, and where I guess we're going to be getting to the back wall,
we will,
is a perfectly great place to start.
Yep.
Yes, you can go 4 inches. Yes, you can go 6 inches. Yes, you can go 2 inches. I have a little bit of 4-inch panels in here, but mostly 2-inch panels, but I got a lot of them. And they stand off the wall a little bit. You can make yours stand off the wall as well.
Sure.
And get extra effectiveness out of them that way. It's just sort of whatever you're comfortable with. So, again, these are not hard to build yourself. You can Definitely do it.
I'm really quite a fan of the kits. And actually, GIK and Acoustimac both sell kits. I don't like to call those kits DIY. I like to call them some assembly required, because that's really what they are. Everything's cut, everything's drilled. The hardest part is wrapping the fabric, which you do with a staple gun. Like it's assembly required, not truly DIY. So I really like those kits. In terms of GIK versus Acoustimac, GIK includes an air gap in their frame. So when you hang it, it already has an air gap. Acoustimac doesn't include an air gap. You can make your own with some little standoffs or use little C brackets to attach them to the walls or anything like that. You can do it yourself, but the GIK ones just have it incorporated already. As thick as you reasonably can. If you're like, honestly, 4-inch thick panels that are 2 inches off the wall, it just looks weird because the room isn't that wide and I just don't want them that thick. That's fine. That's fine. You know, the standard 242 panels that GIK sells is 2 inches of insulation, but it's 1.5 inches of air gap incorporated into it. It's almost as thick as a 4-inch panel, and it's almost as effective as a 4-inch panel. So you can totally do things that way. And I think that answers that one.
On the back wall, in Monty's case, since he's sitting closer to the front wall than the back, GIK suggested it wasn't as high a priority as the corners and the first reflections, but it would still be beneficial to treat it again as thick as he possibly can, and it might be a good place for alpha combo panels or scatter plates. He's going to have open shelves in front of the back walls. Will those impact the audio? Should he just cover the entire back wall? What should he do back there? I mean, you can always cover the entire back wall. That's going to be something.
I mean, to me, this is another DIY. This is like...
I mean, it's going to be so easy to not even see that you don't even have to do it good. You could do it bad and it would still be okay. But because it's going to be behind the shelves. Now, these shelves are open. For those of you that aren't on YouTube and seeing the picture, the shelves are just like wooden stick frame with the little things in there. You don't need scatter plates if this is on your back wall, because this is a DIY scatter plate.
The shelves in the Lego are not mathematically calculated scatter plates, but
it's fine.
Yeah, like you don't need the visual interest of the scatter plates or the alpha panels because you're going to have your own shelves in front of it. I would just do insulation, and I'm really like if you're comfortable doing the super chunks, then your back wall should definitely be DIY. Because again, all you're doing is putting insulation on that back wall as thick as you can and then covering it with some fabric. And whatever's holding it there does not need to be fancy. It doesn't even really need to look that well because you've got the shelves in front of it. So I'm a big proponent of doing that one DIY.
I mean, you could just, if it were me, you could just take your shelves, right? Just attach fabric to the back of the shelves. And then just measure out where you're going to put it.
Yeah.
Pull the shelves forward a little bit. Just put insulation on that wall. Like, however it gets there, no one cares.
Yeah.
And then put the shelves in front of it.
Yeah.
And it'll work just fine.
Yep. I agree.
You don't even have to install, put frames around the installation. If you can get it to stick to the wall in any way, shape, I mean, like glue or something, I don't know.
Or even just straps that go across and then just stick to the wall on either side.
Right. I mean, it could be this could be as funky as you want it to be, because it's really, no one's ever going to go back there and look behind your shelves and try to see it. So I scatter, I think, I'm not saying that you can't buy panels and put them back there. That's just as that works just as well. But, this really is.
Yeah, I would cheap out on the
most
back wall.
DIY that you can possibly do. So you would basically make your entire shelving unit into one big panel.
Yeah. All hidden behind the back of the shelves.
All hidden behind the back of the shelves. So the front wall behind his speakers, depending on how close they are to the wall, GIK suggested he might be best to get them as close to a treated wall as possible, and again to use panels that are as thick as possible. They're always going to say that.
And
Thickness
so will
is
we.
Always better. And I am not going to disagree with them.
You basically can't go too thick. So
I mean, if you're like, I'm treating every wall in my house, in my room, floor to ceiling, how thick should I go? I'd be like, okay, wait, let's pare it back a little bit here. We don't need 6 inches of insulation 3 inches off the wall on every single square inch of every wall. So you're going to, as thick as possible is going to be a given. After that, they said to test the results and potentially fine tune with more treatments if there are intermittent issues. Our thoughts on that. Behind the front speakers I think are usually a good idea. It doesn't necessarily have to be there, but it is one of those things where, okay, so first reflections, back wall, corners, and that is like that's where I stop right there.
Sure.
I stop right there, and then experience my home theater. Now you've got your, according to these diagrams, you've got your subs, which look to be cylinder subs.
Yep.
So
that's coming up
on you. It's placed properly. You have a 5.1 system that looks like it's laid out reasonably. Putting panels behind your front speakers, I think, is a perfectly reasonable thing to do. I don't know that after you have done all these other things, it's going to make a huge amount of difference, but it should do something.
It can make the crossover to the subwoofers, between the front speakers and the subwoofers, that much easier.
Right.
If you're fiddling a lot with the EQ, sometimes you can get away with not doing it. Like if you've saved enough money building your own super chunks and cheaply treating that back wall and hiding it with your shelves, that you're like, hey, I've actually got some money left over in the budget to also treat the front wall, go ahead and treat the front wall. Like, honestly, I agree with everything Gik told you, and I agree with the order that they stressed doing this in. If it really comes down to this is all I can afford, what do I do first and what do I compromise on? I agree with the order they gave you. I agree that you always go as thick as you reasonably can and never go under 2 inches, because then you're really not doing anything, so don't go that thin. But 2 inches and an air gap, that's okay for the reflection points, and that'd be okay on your front wall as well. But wherever you can, go as thick as you can. And I'm on board with all of this, honestly. But I would do more of it DIY, just because I think there are some that are really suit themselves to that.
Right. So he plans to have an OLED on a TV stand, so he'll be about 8.5 or 9 feet from eyes to screen. When he goes out to a movie theater, he likes to sit 2/3 of the way into the theater. So does that mean from the front wall or from the back wall?
From the front screen.
So 2/3 of the way back away from that. Okay. So he prefers a similar field of view to Rob. It's just exactly the same place I sit. So it's not like Rob invented that. All right. Let's just dispel that.
I mean, it's
right
also
there.
The location where they sit when they're mastering the movie in a
which
full
is why I
suite.
sit there.
That's right. Or if you look at
I don't care about the size of the screen. I care about where the sound is the best, which is why when I go to like live theater, I'm like, where's the sound booth? I want to sit close to that.
If you look at the Dolby guidelines for cinemas, not for home theater, but for full-size cinemas, then there's this sort of little area, and the prime spot is 2/3 of the way from the screen.
That's right. So what size OLED should he get? Will a 77-inch be large enough, or does he need an 83? 8.5 to 9 feet. I'm leaning towards that 83, and it might not actually be as big as you want it to be. Like I said about that, and I have a 92. So yeah.
Yeah, you want to go as big as you can. I mean, honestly, if you are 9 feet and not 8.5, the 97-inch OLED, if you could afford it, would be good. But that one's going to be expensive.
We're telling the man to DIY his bass traps to save money, and then we tell him to buy an $8,000 screen, because that makes all sorts of sense.
Oh, the 97 is going to be more than 8,000.
That's not even the one that I was thinking about. Yes,
the 83 is 5,000, so that's not. I mean, that's expensive, but it's not out of the realm of possibility for a dedicated home theater. But yeah, you're going to want to go as big as you can. The easy sort of back of the napkin rule of thumb math that I like to use now is if you're 8.5 feet away, then the 95-inch screen would give you the 45-degree field of view that we're talking about. The 45-degree field of view is the 2/3 of the way into the theater. So if you're 7.5 feet away, an 85-inch screen is what's going to give you that field of view. So maybe you sit a little closer, or maybe you nudge that screen a little bit more towards the front of that TV stand. Those are the easy solutions to bring that screen a little bit closer to you. But if you can afford the 83-inch, I'm going to say go for the 83-inch in this case.
Yeah, which is going to make the rest of my answers to your question dismissive and probably insulting. So I apologize to start off with, because I'm looking forward at some of your questions here, and I'm reading forward and wondering whether or not that we're all on the same page. So any suggestions for a TV stand with a 4-door cabinet? He likes the look of offerings from BDI and Salamander, but they are expensive, and the other brands we like. If you're willing to buy an 83-inch TV and you're not willing to spend money on the
I don't know, man, though. Both of those, they are, I consider them way overpriced. They're thousands
they usually
of
are.
dollars. It's crazy. For a TV stand?
It's furniture. Salamander. What is it?
They're like
Salamander.
$3,000. It's crazy for a TV stand. I think that's overpriced. While
they're actually No, the ones I'm looking at are $4,000.
Okay,
$3,600. Oh, that's $4,000. This one is.
Yeah, I find that a bit ridiculous for a TV stand. So while Tom is looking up more prices there, standsandmounts.com I can't totally vouch for them because I never bought for them, but they've got a nice selection of TV stands. I'm just going to show a very small clip it on YouTube there, but yeah, they've got a brand. What the heck is it called? Walker Edison. I know nothing about them, but from the outside they look pretty nice. If you click into any of them, the details on them, they all look completely reasonable, and these are in the a few $100, maybe $400 or $500 at the most.
Right.
Definitely more affordable. The looks are there, the sizes are there, the way they're put together. As far as the design of the ventilation and stuff, it all looks completely reasonable to me. So I'll throw it out there as a suggestion for worthy of consideration. In any case, I certainly think, yeah, those BDI and salamanders are crazy expensive.
So I found a 4-door one that was $2,000. That's at Best Buy. I feel like for that amount of money, you could probably just hire somebody to come in and install something for you for cheap. I'm surprised you can't find anything at Sanus, but which is usually where I go for racks. Natural Series.
Yeah, they haven't been doing a ton of sort of wood front panel, that type of design much anymore, and they're not cheap either. They're not exactly cheap, the Sanus ones. So yeah, well, I'll include the link over to Stands and Mounts. You can look at these Walker Edison ones and see if there's something that's to your liking. And yeah, like I say, they're in the hundreds of dollars, and I consider that much more reasonable.
Okay. Let me just look at this stupid thing real quick. Yeah, so I'm not seeing much at Sanus at all,
yeah,
to be honest with you.
I did look. That's why I didn't put it there, because I didn't see solutions that really leapt out at me.
No, they don't. They have more of that open rack kind of design, but they're, I mean, like I said. I have to go back. On the speaker front, he already owns a pair of Ascend Sierra 2 bookshelves and loves them. He contacted Dave, the founder of Ascend. He recommended adding a duo LCR for the center instead of the Sierra 2 center, as he figured the form factor would work better for Monty's setup. Dave also suggested he might want to use his current Sierra 2 for surrounds and upgrade to the EX for the front, left, and right. Monty wants to end up with a 5.2.4 configuration, so that would work, but he also just keep using his Sierra 2s at front and add a pair of Sierra Lunas for surrounds. That would cost a bit less, and he could wall mount the Lunas. What do we think he should do? The Lunas are not they're trapezoidal shaped.
No. They're just like a satellite speaker with a keyhole mount on the back.
I'm thinking. What am I thinking of that has?
I don't know.
I don't
Ascend
know.
doesn't have any trapezoidal shaped speakers at all. They're all square.
I mean, you're not sitting super far away from any of these speakers, so I don't see any reason why you quote unquote need to upgrade. To the EXs. The X is not. That's not the one with the RAW ribbons, right?
They do. Yeah, all of these options, the Luna, the Sierra 2, the Duo, the Sierra 2 EX, they all have RAW ribbon tweeters. So
what's the difference with the EX? What's the
higher power handling, deeper bass in the same bookshelf form factor.
Yeah, I don't
think you need it.
As far as the form factor, I don't think he's wrong about the Duo. Because I
actually agree there, yeah.
Yeah, what you're looking at here is these are off-the-shelf, quote-unquote, off-the-shelf designs for equipment racks, which means they're not going to, because the Sierra 2 on its side doesn't normally fit inside these cabinets, because of its,
and it's also,
it would be its height, but it when standing up, it's its width.
Yeah, the Sierra 2 center is rear ported while the Duo is front ported. That might be an advantage in the TV cabinet. So it is a little bit more money to get the Duo LCR as a center versus the Sierra 2 center, but I agree with Dave on that one. I think it all lines up, and it's not crazy more expensive, so I think the form factor does make more sense for there. It will timbre match wonderfully with your current Sierra 2s. I have no qualms about that whatsoever. No worries on that front. I don't think it's worth upgrading the Sierra 2 EX for your fronts, and I think the Lunas would fit more easily wall mounted for your surrounds. Their output is going to be totally fine with the distances you've got, and they cost a bit less. So I say go for the less expensive solution here, but spend a little bit more and get that Duo for the center.
I agree with that. Lastly, he's planned for a pair of SVS PC2000 Pro cylinder subs with them at the midpoints of the two side walls. Is that a good choice?
Yes.
It's more than enough than you need for this room, and it's the smallest cylinder they sell.
That's right.
So if there was a smaller one, I might recommend that.
Sure.
But they don't. So there you go. Gick actually mentioned that they wouldn't put the two subs exactly in the middle of the two side walls, but Harmon's research on that seems pretty darn clear, so I'll probably ignore that one bit from Gick. What do we say? Well, I say Gick should stick to room treatments and shut up about subwoofer.
Yeah, they're still talking about the 1/3 wall placement and stuff, and that's going back a long ways. So no, listen to Harmon.
I love Gick.
Listen to us.
Don't get me wrong, I love Gick, but you stay in your lane, Haas.
And like I say, on their room treatment plan for you, I would thumbs up all the way. So
yeah. Jay in Canada, I am telling you, I need to stand up from the seat for a second.
Okay.
Because I need to get some more coffee. I need to go to the bathroom, and I have the windows open in this house because it's a cooler day, and I'm starting to shiver in this room. I need to close the door because I am getting very cold. I know. It's
this is all talking about HDMI
40s.
cables in his first question. So while I'm answering that, you can definitely do that. I can handle this one.
Well, hold on. Let me at least read the question.
Yeah.
I gotta see what the temperature is here. It's 50 degrees. I don't know what that is in Canadian.
Celsius? I don't know. Seems comfortable to me though. It's above freezing, so I'd probably be a bit warm.
You probably would, you freak. Jay in Canada. Jay is nearing completion of his soundproofed basement home theater. The final size will be 22.5 by 12.5 by 7.5. So, no NBA players allowed. The ceiling and two-party walls are decoupled with clips and hat channels, and everything is insulated plus drywall with green glue, double drywall with green glue. He'll have a riser for a second row of seats. Again, you're definitely not sitting there if you're an NBA player. You're going to be bumping your head. It's a 7.2.4 configuration using all golden ear speakers. There are two pairs of surrounds so that each row gets its own. He's using an Epson 5050B UBE. I don't even know that there was an E version. The version that has wireless HDMI. Oh, there you go.
That's it.
And he'll use the room for movies, games, and music listening. His gear is in an equipment rack outside the room. He planned ahead and ran a conduit so that he could have his laptop at his main seat and have it connected to the AV receiver using a long 25-foot HDMI cable, but he needs to know which HDMI cable to buy. Finding an ultra-high-speed cable of that length seems challenging. Should he not worry about future-proofing and 48 gigabits per second? Even if he does that, which HDMI cable should he get? He's fine with spending around $100, but not if it's a gamble. All right, well, there you go.
All right, off Tom goes for a little bit to warm up and get some coffee. So since you're in Canada, I'm going to jump straight to the answer that I think is what you should get, which is Cable Matters sells their cables through Amazon.ca, so easy to get, free shipping if you're on Amazon Prime, and they have active fiber optic ultra high speed HDMI cables available from that brand now. So it's the full 48 gigabits per second. It's fiber optic carrying the the high bandwidth signals. There's some copper in there, so it still works with ARC and things like that. But for all the video part of it, it's fiber optics. Now, they don't have one that's exactly 25 feet. I believe the one I'm linking to is 32 feet, but better to go a bit longer than too short, I would say. Now, it's $115 Canadian. 115 Canadian dollars, but I think that's the way to go. That's the one I'm going to point you to straight off the bat. I think that's the solution. I don't love the idea. I mean, even though you got conduit and you could pull something through in the future, why not just get the cable that's going to work for the foreseeable future until there's some brand new spec that goes even higher in bandwidth? And I don't think the price is crazy for what you're getting. So Cable Matters. What's important here is that it is fully certified. It has gone through the testing. It's got the QR code. It's got the hologram on the packaging. It is fully certified. Cable Matters is a pretty big cable brand and I trust them. So when they're fully certified, ultra high speed, fiber optic, I think that's the way to go. Just to mention, for people in the States, you can get that very same cable. They sell it for $99 on Amazon.com. Cable Matters, that's the 32-foot link that we're talking about. Now, Monoprice also has fully certified fiber optic HDMI cables. If you're in the States, it's a little bit less expensive because that same length, I think is 32 or 33 feet, goes for $80 US, although that's directly from Monoprice and there's a bit of a shipping charge on top of that. So ultimately, they're pretty darn close in price. For people who are looking for not fiber optic, if you're specifically for some reason want passive copper, Zeskit is fully certified. They've got the QR code, they've got the hologram, and they make the longest copper passive ultra high speed HDMI cable. They make it up to a 23-foot length, and it's only $55 on Amazon.com. The weird thing is, cannot find it on Amazon.ca. Can't find it from a Canadian retailer. We do have the Zeskit brand available from Amazon.ca, but the longest link that I could find available in Canada was 16 feet. And that's only 43 Canadian dollars. So the prices on the Zeskit ones, very, very reasonable, but they don't quite have the length that you said you were looking for. So cable matters, fiber optic, 115 Canadian dollars. I know it's a little bit pricey, but I think that's the way to go. So Tom is sitting back down, but I'll just start in on B here. He said he invested in a beefy door, but he needs a proper seal that goes all around and underneath of that beefy door. So there are lots of door seal gasket sets that are available, but most seem to be very basic. Some of them, they offer like a standard and a heavy duty option. So he's like, some of these look like they're kind of cheaply made, even though some of them are expensive. So it's a whole rabbit hole that he didn't anticipate. Can we tell him what to get for a door seal kit or a jam seal plus, an automatic door bottom seal? And are the heavy duty versions worth the extra money? Yeah, I'm not sure how much of that Tom heard.
I heard very little of it.
Okay.
Sorry.
No worries. So, okay, I'll just jump right into this again. Because he mentioned he already talked to Soundproofing Company. I would kind of just stick with them, honestly. All Soundproofing Company sells are what everybody else labels is the heavy duty version. That's all they sell. That's all they have available. And actually, the model that they mention is available from multiple places, pretty much all of which who are we talking to here? Jay mentioned himself. So like Acoustical Solutions, they sell the very same ones as their heavy duty version. Let's see, Trademark Soundproofing also sells this very same one as their heavy duty version. So what we've got here, they're adjustable, which I think is important. They use this kind of flattened O style, so it's compressible. It's not just a completely flat bottom. It's not a grooved bottom. It kind of forms this little bit of a balloon seal, and it's all adjustable. So you have three of them that go along the top and the two sides. Those actually screw directly onto the door jamb, and then the automatic door bottom screws onto the door itself and moves along with the door. And there's sort of a little button on the side that activates whether it raises or lowers the automatic door bottom. So I would stick with the heavy duty. If you look at the other designs that are for the standard or the basic, the thing that I really don't like about the flat bottom or the grooved bottom is you have to remember, at first they're fine. At first they work fine. You're like, why would I have paid more? They're gonna get dusty. They're gonna get dirty. And the ones that have the grooves along the bottom, there's no way to clean the dust and dirt out of it. And that seal just starts to fail. The ones that have the little sort of flap, those wear out. They absolutely wear out. And again, it's like absolute terror to try and clean those. And the ones that are completely flat on the bottom, they actually get dirt like embedded into it. That, I don't know, you got to pick it out with tweezers every time. How do you get to the bottom of the door on that one? The balloon style ones, which is all that Soundproofing Company sells and what everybody else, Trademark and Acoustical Solutions, sell as their heavy duty, that's the only one I would go for. Because in terms of working over the long term, they're easier to clean because they're pliable. You can get the dirt that gets pushed into them out of them. They form the better seal. I think they are worth the extra money for the duration. Like I say, when you first get the flat bottom ones or the grooved ones, people are like, why would I have paid more? It's over time you realize why you paid more.
10 degrees Celsius.
Okay.
That's what the temperature is here right now. 10 degrees.
I'm
very cold. I put on the hoodie and everything.
It's totally comfortable for me would be 10 degrees. I
don't know that it's 10 degrees in this house. I know it's 10 degrees outside. I don't know that it's 10 degrees
It's probably
in this
much
house.
Warmer inside your house. Too warm for me.
Tell that to my feet and other parts of my body, which have gotten very, very cold. All right, he had an IlluminVision reference screen before, and he was very happy with it. He wants to install a 16:9 screen this time. One of us. Mm-hmm. And he assumed he'd go with IlluminVision again, but he had an installer working on his theater, and he warned that as of late, IlluminVision's quality control seems to have taken a hit, while their prices have gone up. So he didn't think they're a good value anymore and suggested either Grandview or Cirrus.
Cyrus or Cirrus. I'm not sure how they pronounce it, but yeah.
Cyrus screens instead, or to pony up for Screen Innovations or Stewart Film Screen if he just wants the best. What do we say? It's a strange phenomenon that I find that with experts, that they will almost always find something that you want that they have an insider's knowledge on that tells you that it is not as good as you thought it was. And it happens almost all the time. Like if you talk to almost any person who is has that sort of base of knowledge, and you're looking to them, like in order to establish their credentials with you, they can't agree with you. They can't tell you what you want to hear. They have to tell you that something is bad, and that they have a better solution. And that seems to be pretty universal. I don't know. I have never. This is literally the first time we've heard on this podcast anything about IlluminVision having quality control issues, and which makes it suspect to me.
I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibility as of late because of all supply chain issues and everything that's been going on that's affected lots of companies. But I haven't come across those same claims.
If you follow this advice, you'll never know.
Right. Yeah.
You would never know if it was correct or not because you wouldn't have bought the thing, which makes it the safest. Like he could say whatever, this person or any of these people could say whatever they want because you're only going to buy one. You're not going to buy two and compare.
And if you bought an IlluminVision and it's completely perfect, you'd be like, oh, I guess you got lucky.
Right. So he's still not the person is still not wrong, no matter how they couch this advice of theirs. So I'm not in love with just believing them on the face. And if you've had good luck with the IlluminVision, I would say feel free to buy another one if you can find them. Yeah,
and I mean certainly in Canada they're more affordable than a lot of the other nicer screen brands and that. So I don't know. What I can say is that Grandview, their screens, as far as I can tell, they're identical to Silver Ticket because they're exactly the same in every way that I can find, except the Grandview versions cost a little bit more. They priced them a little bit higher, but it's the exact same method of attaching the screen. The offerings are identical, except not as Silver Ticket has a wider range of products that they offer, at least in the States. But as far as I can tell, Grandview is probably getting it from the exact same OEM. The Cirrus screens or however it's pronounced, like their attachment method is exactly the same as IlluminVision. And the designs of their frames is not quite as robust as IlluminVision's, but the way that the screen is attached and everything is identical. So I don't know. I don't know anything about that screen company. I have no. They are a Canadian company, just like IlluminVision is. If it turned out they were getting their screens from the same OEM, it wouldn't shock me one little bit because, like I say, the backs of them are identical. The way the screen attaches it is identical. When it comes to screen, even though it is more expensive to import them into Canada, if you want what I consider the best, I still love Seymour. I'm a huge fan of Seymour. I think their way of attaching their screen is the best, and why nobody else has copied them. I don't know if they have a patent on how they attach their screens, but I think it's the best method in my opinion. I like it better than the little springs that eventually wear out over time, or just the tension rods that, when it's the Silver Ticket ones, I'm like, yeah, it cost you $200, so I don't care. If you have to replace that in 8 years, I'm not really worried about it when it was a $200 screen. But when the tension rod system is much more expensive than that, I'm not a huge fan of it. So I don't know. If you're uncomfortable with IlluminVision at this point, I would say import a Seymour AV screen because that's what I'm the most comfortable with. Maybe look into Cirrus, however it's pronounced, because like I say, they look really, really similar to IlluminVision's. But I would also feel pretty comfortable still buying from IlluminVision because, like, honestly, if you get a screen and you unpack it and it's just terrible, like, there is a return window.
I'm gonna say, I mean, it's not like screens like perform fine and then one day you go in there and they're just ripped in half. Yeah. Like, if it's bad.
Yeah.
Like
it doesn't
the minute
fit together
you
properly, it's all uneven. The finish on the material is all messed up or something. Like, you're gonna see it right away. So.
And it's so common to hear this sort of thing, and and as somebody who gives advice on a regular basis, as we do on this podcast, there are some times when people have asked me things, and I'm like, I'm tempted to just go, well, there's a better option out there, and this is why you should have it. And when the reality is, what they bought is fine, because they almost always ask you about what they've already purchased. So, just you don't have to.
The only exception is
try to build yourself up by talking about how much more you know about this.
Only exception is some Bose Cube speakers. There's no way I can just turn a blind eye and say, oh yeah, you did well.
I just say, Oh.
Yeah.
That's it. I don't have an opinion. When I bought these were considered the best. Were they? Were they considered?
They were
the best?
Certainly the most expensive.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that. Yeah, I hadn't been made aware. He got it in mind that he'd love to have a Starfield look on his ceiling, but he didn't want the typical LED or fiber optic ceiling instead. He was drawn to Night Sky Murals, which is a glow-in-the-dark paint. And since price is a concern, he's very interested in their DIY stencil kits. Are you secretly a 14-year-old girl? Let me just ask you this. Or a 14-year-old period, I think this is very popular in that age bracket. The right 13 to 15-year-olds, Starfield on the ceiling. Are you sure you're not going to want to just get the stickers? It's got the stickers too. The paint is activated by ultraviolet light, and Jeff, the owner, recommends using those shorter wavelength 365 nanometer black lights so there is very little visible light, and suggested waveform floodlights in particular since Jay doesn't have soffits to hide LED strips along the ceiling. But the waveform black lights are expensive. He found plenty of much cheaper black lights for sale, but there are lots of negative reviews about most of them. This is probably outside of our wheelhouse. Do we have any suggestions? I suggest you 100% don't do this, as what I suggest.
I really don't like the Starfield ceilings.
Okay, not only do I not suggest you do this, I actively, like, black lights, full stop. People are like, oh, well, it's just a black light. I can't even see it. It puts off ultraviolet radiation still. You are literally...
It's not into the cancer-causing region.
That's... I know.
Longer wavelengths than that, but it's long enough wavelengths that all black lights are a little bit visible, so... It's some of the description sounded like having it on while the movie was going. I'm like, no, absolutely not. And I wouldn't want that Starfield glowing while the movie is going either. I want it as close to pitch black because it's going to be a projection setup in this theater. So my honest suggestion to you is don't do it. Don't do the Starfield in any way. Don't do it as the LEDs. Don't do it as the fiber optics. Don't do it as the glow-in-the-dark paint. This is money that you can absolutely save and just not have the Starfield. But to answer the question as wrote, I mean, I'm sure I found the same ones that he came across on Amazon.ca, which is Everbeam. Everbeams, they claim it as 365 nanometer. No, it's completely visible. It's purple light. It's actually a blue LED. That's what it is. It'll activate the paint just fine, but what you would do is have these on while you're not in the room and charge up your glow-in-the-dark paint, and then you would turn them off when you're going to turn the lights off for the rest of the room. You would turn these off too, and you would let your ceiling glow for its couple of hours, and hopefully it'll stop glowing before that so that it stops ruining your movie about halfway through. But in any event, I'd be fine with these because they're cheap, and yes, they're going to heat up the room and they're going to burn out really quickly, but whatever, replace them because you're only going to use that Starfield twice and then you're going to realize you don't want it anymore. But there's also just regular black light bulbs, and honestly, these work better. They're just not as bright. So they're just, they look like regular light bulbs that screw into any light socket. You'd need about 4 of them for this room size. So I'd be more in favor of those if you're just bound and determined to do this, but I don't do the star ceiling. That's my honest advice.
I'll tell you what, this is my suggestion. All right. There are about 1,000 different planetarium things that you can buy that will project things onto your wall.
Yeah. Or if like that Samsung, that little portable Samsung thing where no matter where you put it, it squares itself up and focuses. Like you get that with like a USB stick, which you can plug straight into it with star patterns on it. I'd be more in favor of that. Oh, I'm much more in favor of that.
Look at Rob disagreeing with Tom left and right here. Yeah, getting something like that so that you can project it onto a normal ceiling. And then you don't have glow-in-the-dark paint up there or an installed at all the cost. And then if you just want it to look that way while you walk in, you connect it up to your Harmony remote or whatever, and then turn. When you press the button to turn it off, turn on everything else, it turns that off. Yeah, Bob's your uncle. That's the way I would. That's the way I would approach this. That way you can see the stuff on the ceiling, and then you can get rid of it.
And you know what?
You could, it doesn't cost that much.
Because it's a video projection, you could update it to be astronomically accurate no matter what time of year it is, too.
You could actually have it, if you're real clever, you can figure out a way to show the actual night sky that's above your house at that moment.
Or you can say, hey, we just teleported to a different hemisphere and you're showing their stars.
Yeah. Todd is hoping to get an Ultra HD Blu-ray player for $250 or less. He also wants Dolby Vision. A quick search turned up the Sony X800M2 with a big bonus that the player is that it also includes Bluetooth audio output. So late at night, it would be easy to send the audio to some Bluetooth headphones. He'll be connecting it to an LG OLED. But then he read about the crazy lack of auto switching for Dolby Vision, and that has him reconsidering. But he couldn't find any alternative players that check all the boxes. Do we have any suggestions? So he wants to be able to stream the audio sometimes from the player. I think there is your limiting factor. Like there's not that many players out there anymore. I really don't understand.
Yeah, there's very few Ultra HD Blu-ray players, full stop.
So I think that trying to limit to only ones that have Bluetooth is, you're going to have no options. Right. But there are other ways of getting Bluetooth to your headset that don't involve the player. Yes, you will have to pay extra for it.
Yeah.
But,
dude. Yeah, little Bluetooth sound transmitter. Like I always like the AVRant ones. The Audicast from AVRant is under $50. So, and it's very, very small. So yeah, it's unobtrusive and it works perfectly fine and it's not expensive. But here's the thing: like, if you want an Ultra HD Blu-ray player in North America that automatically switches Dolby Vision on and off when it should, there's basically the Panasonic UB820 and nothing else. Like, the LG players do it, but then the LG players don't handle 24 frames per second properly. It's utterly bizarre how this is still the state of things, but like, nobody's making Ultra HD Blu-ray players anymore. So the UB820 I can totally recommend. It has, just regular analog audio outputs that you could plug into the AVRant Audicast or any other Bluetooth transmitter. So it's totally doable on a technical level, but that player is double this price. So it doesn't check all the boxes. It costs twice as much. So if the price is the concern.
Oh, it's $500. Yeah. Right. I was just looking at it. It said it was $250 when I clicked on it, but then
that'd be the UB420. But the UB420 doesn't do Dolby Vision at all. Over in Europe, they've got the UB450, which would be a great solution because it's the price of the UB420, but it supports Dolby Vision and does it properly. But Panasonic, for some reason, has never brought the UB450 over to North America. They just stuck with the 420, which doesn't do Dolby Vision, and the 820, which does, but it costs $500 at list price. I've often seen it go on sale for $400, but that's still well above $250. So honestly, what I'm going to suggest is, if price is a concern, the Sony X800M2 does all the things you want. It's just you have to manually switch Dolby Vision on and off. And I would say, if you're willing to, just go over to nextgenhometheater.com and go to their list of Dolby Vision supporting titles and just double check that your title really is Dolby Vision or not in their list, and then you switch Dolby Vision on and off, because nobody else in your family is going to notice or care.
Yeah. How much is it going to be worth to you? $250 to have it do it itself, or
additional $250 above the $250 you were going to spend? Yeah.
You spend an extra $250 for it to switch it itself, or you can pay yourself $250 to switch it however many times that you're going to have to switch it. So, that's what it comes down to.
Here's the other little thing I'm going to come at. LG OLED, it's got LG's frame-by-frame tone mapping. I'll bet you just never turn Dolby Vision back on, and you just live with LG's frame-by-frame dynamic tone mapping for HDR10 content. That's what I would do.
Bret still has an Oppo 105 Blu-ray player, and he uses it as a headphone amp and stereo preamp with some audio engine speakers. He knows that when he uses the apps built into his LG C1 OLED and sending the audio into the Oppo via HDMI ARC, he has lip sync issues. And worst of all, it seems to be different from app to app. Adjusting the audio delay on the Oppo is a pain because he has to switch to Oppo's HDMI output to see the menu, then guess at the adjustment he should make, then switch back to the HDMI ARC port or ARC port, see if you guessed correctly. Furthermore, it just feels crazy. You have to rely on looking at lips moving while people talk to make this adjustment every time he switches apps in the LG. Excuse me. I hate coughing these days because everybody's like, "You got the Rona." No,
you just drank some coffee and it went down the wrong pipe.
Coffee and it's thick in my throat. So, is there a setting that will fix this, or a process you can follow to consistently get good timing? Yeah, I don't know that this Oppo was ever really meant to do this all this well. I mean, I don't know. What do you got, Rob?
So my honest solution is get an external streaming device. That's that's truly my solution. I would recommend the Apple TV 4K because it does the best job of switching automatically between frame rates and switching automatically between HDR formats, and it does it really well and smoothly these days. So I would suggest spending the $160, $170 for an Apple TV 4K. To me, that's the best solution. You could, if you want to spend more than that for some reason, have your HDMI ARC port go through an HD Fury Arcana, because this is precisely what the HD Fury Arcana is for, well, I mean, among many other things, but it solves lip sync issues from HDMI ARC and HDMI eARC. That's what the HD Fury Arcana does, but it's $250. So I would much rather spend, $100 less than that and just get an external streaming device. I don't have a better solution than that, but I would 100% get an external streaming device.
Yeah, we just wrote an article over at AV Gadgets about DTS and using eARC to get DTS and some TVs not supporting it, and the solution that we came up with is essentially the same thing. Yeah. I mean, with the apps in your TV, I cannot tell you how much I hate that they put them there. It causes so many problems for everybody that's not using the built-in speakers. Mm-hmm. The minute that you stop using the built-in speakers on your TV, you're just, lip sync issues, codec compatibility issues, getting everything to connect correctly back down to your receiver. Yep. It's just all a mess. So I wish they hadn't done it. So the real solution to all of these, the apps in my TV are doing, I don't care what's after the dot. It's always stop using the apps in your TV. And I do recognize that some of the apps, at least until the rest of the streaming boxes catch up, will sometimes support things like Dolby Vision that other apps don't support right away. And there is some benefit to using that app for that period of time, but it is far, far, far outweighed by the negatives of all the things those apps do. So, never use the apps in your TV. That's what it comes down to. Just don't ever do it. Karl, we've just been discussing Karl's Vanta Black theater plans for his detached garage, and he still intends to use a JVC projector in there, but one day micro LED will almost certainly be the way to go, and he has a bit of a theoretical question. In his mind's eye, this room is going to be so black that if you're standing outside the door of the theater and you stick your arm inside, your arm will disappear from view. You, sir, are about to be disappointed, but let us go on. But of course, even the JVC projectors do not produce a black level that perfect, so whenever the projector is on, there is going to be a faint glow of light visible on the screen. Mm-hmm. Supposedly, micro LED will have perfect black levels, just like OLED, so one day he could have the display on and the room's blackness would still be perfect until an image appears on the screen. He loves this idea of an image appearing out of nowhere in perfect blackness all around, as though it is hovering in outer space. You could get that right now by having an OLED, but let's go on. But micro
not
LEDs,
at 135 inches.
No, you could not. Yes, well, not unless you're got some Musk money. But micro LEDs are also supposed to be much brighter than a projection setup, so wouldn't that cause eye fatigue? Naturally, the countermeasure is typically bias lighting, but that would take away from this perfect blackness idea he has in his mind. Furthermore, when you go to, say, a Dolby Cinema, they don't have any bias lighting. That is not true, but go on. It's as close to perfect blackness as they can get. So what's our take on this? Do we agree that total blackness means the fewest distractions? But if so, can a direct view display be viewed without bias lighting, without it causing eye fatigue? So there is almost always some ambient light in movie theaters. I don't,
Well, for safety reasons, they have to have the exit signs.
Yeah,
they wouldn't if they could. Dolby Cinemas would remove those if they were legally allowed to.
But they usually have at least some sort of glowing strip along the ground that shows you where the stairs are, so you don't go tumbling down as you leave. So there is usually some ambient light in every theater. But
he's talking about the typical bias lighting where there's light behind the screen itself.
No, I agree. I know what he's talking about. So, if your walls are painted this Vanta black anyways, that light isn't really going to be all that biasy to begin with.
Actually that black,
because the way that the bias light works is it's behind your screen or your screen frame in your case, and then it hits the back wall and then reflects forward. Okay.
Yeah.
And that gives you that glow around the screen that gives you the bias light. you wouldn't have that.
No.
You would turn the lights on behind your screen and, in theory, see nothing.
Yeah.
Because that would be the difference.
If
So
it's
bias
the Vanta
light
black
in
or the
your case
Musso black just absorbs
would not
it all.
help you. But your question is eye fatigue. And my answer is a properly calibrated screen, regardless of how bright it can get, shouldn't, I mean, after some period of time it will, but that's just the nature of watching a screen for a long period of time, but shouldn't by definition give you eye fatigue like within seconds of sitting in there. Okay, if you're going from a completely black screen to like that Tatooine image at the beginning of Star Wars, yes, but we don't almost never do that. There are movies that have that flip back and forth between very, very dark and very, very bright, and they will give you headaches regardless of whether or not you've got bias lighting going on and anything else in there. It is like very jarring.
Flashing sequence in Ghost in the Shell, the live action version, the Scarlett Johansson version. It's like you're watching that in HDR on any display of any size, and whoa, man, that's like it's painful.
Most movies, I would feel like if you have it properly calibrated, you could watch a whole movie and you wouldn't get eye fatigue just because you've got this completely blacked out theater. It shouldn't do that because of the proper calibration. Now, if you're watching some movie that has like what Rob's talking about with the flashing, or what I'm talking about going from completely black to completely bright images back and forth throughout the movie, it could happen. But I don't think that's because of the nature of the display or how dark it is in the room. It's because of the nature of the content.
Yeah. I mean, on a technical level, like if you're going into a grading suite, what's going on there is either some of them are still using like the dual layer LCD displays as their grading monitors, and they come close, but they're not perfect black. And so part of the bias lighting there is to make it, perceptually look like perfect black to your eye, because the whole point of the bias light is that it makes your pupils constrict a little bit, more than they would in total pitch blackness. In total pitch blackness, your pupils are going to be as wide open as they possibly can be. The bias light makes it that your pupils constrict a little bit, so that if your black is not perfect black, it looks like perfect black to you, because your pupils have constricted a little bit and your eyes have adjusted to there being a little bit of light that's behind the screen. But also in a grading suite, the image they're looking at is much smaller than in the full when they get out to the full-size theater. So it's about having the total amount of lumens in the room that you're expected to have from the much larger screen that you'd have in a full-size cinema. In a full-size cinema, if they could have pitch blackness, if they didn't have the exit signs and the strips along the stairs so you could see them when you get up, they would do that. In the Dolby cinemas, they would do that if they could, if legally they weren't required to have the safety measures. But, what it comes down to is the total number of lumens that you're getting from that much, much larger screen, and the bias light sort of equals that out when you're looking at a much smaller screen in a grading studio. When you're talking about having something like a micro LED in a completely pitch black room, you're not going to need bias lighting. What you could do, if you do find the image just overall too bright, because it is definitely going to be brighter than a projector, you can turn that down, just like you can on an OLED. You can turn down the peak brightness now if you're like, but the HDR is calibrated for the brightness being peaked at max. This is what happens today. If you're looking at your OLED or your LCD and you turn the OLED light or the backlight setting down when you're in HDR mode, you actually have impacted the way things are tone mapped, and it doesn't readjust itself. You're going to lose some of the highlight details. That's where in a setup like what you're talking about, you'd want something like a Lumigen. You'd want the thing that can do all the tone mapping ahead of time. You would target it at what you have set for the peak brightness instead of what the peak brightness ends up being with the OLED light or the micro LED light or whatever they're going to end up calling it, akin to a backlight on an LCD, when that's pegged at max, like all of the consumer displays are out of the box. You would have to retone map that ahead of time. But, for the type of situation that you're talking about, a Lumigen isn't going to be out of the question. So that's the way that you can handle this. Theoretically, in your setup, you're still not going to need a bias light.
Okay. What are we on time here?
Yeah, I think we can do one more. At even 10.
JR has a 7.2.4 setup using all B&W speakers for his main 5, then an older pair of Mirage speakers for his surround backs, and 2 pair of SVS Prime Elevation speakers for the overheads, plus dual SVS PC2000 Pro cylinder subs. His Denon X3700H handles the system and powers the surround backs and overheads with its built-in amps. He has a 5-channel Rotel amp for powering the main 5 speakers. He just wants to try some experiments with this setup, but without erasing the settings for what he has already has. So His B&W front speakers have the ability to be bi-amped, and he'd just like to give it a try. If he would like to power each front speakers using 2 of the Rotel's channels each, what's the easiest way to do so? And if he wanted to try using the Denon's bi-amp mode, how would he wire things in that scenario? The surround back speakers are usually used for the bi-amp thing. In
this case, they actually recommission the height 2 binding posts on the Denon.
whatever the Denon one is. If you're not sitting a bajillion feet away, I don't really feel like, and even then, there is really no reason.
I know.
There's just so exceedingly few reasons to buy amp a speaker that doesn't involve just because they want you to spend more money on amps.
Sure.
I mean, that's literally what it comes down to. Like, how much extra power is the tweeter taking?
Oh, it's so
that you
silly.
need to separate it out from the woofer. It's not like that tweeter is pulling 50 watts and your woofers are pulling 100. It's like 0.1 and then the rest of it. So I mean, if you want to do this, just split out your pre-outs for your mains, and then put them into 2 channels of your Rotel amp, and then test it out that way.
Yeah, and if you still want to have the full setup, just plug your surround speakers into the Denon instead of into the Rotel. So the 2 channels that are of the Rotel that are currently powering your surrounds, use those to be the bi-amp for your fronts, and let the Denon power the surrounds. It'll be able to handle the surrounds and surround backs and 4 overheads all together. It'll be just fine.
Yeah, I would use an SPL meter to double check all the at least the levels of your front heights, or whatever the ones that you plug directly into the Denon. You might have to check. You might have to change the trim level slightly but you won't have to change the calibration. The calibration won't change.
And also, the X3700H does have the 2 speaker presets, so you can actually keep what you have exactly as it is as preset number 1, and all of this experimentation that you're talking about will always be done as preset number 2. That is absolutely the way I would do this, because there's no way you're going to lose your current setup that way. You're going to wire things as necessary. So like I said, if you're using the 2 channels on the Rotel, Y splitter you're already using the front left and right pre-outs. You're just going to use a Y splitter on them now and feed 2 channels each on the Rotel. And like I say, you now connect your surrounds directly to the Denon. But I would set that all up as preset number 2. And that, I mean, you can't exactly A/B compare, because preset number 1 doesn't have your surrounds wired to the Denon anymore, so you won't be able to instantly switch back and forth. But you can do this experiment, and then if you are using the Denon itself in its bi-amp mode, now you're not going to be able to keep it as 5.2 or 7.2.4 anymore. There's no way to do that, because like I say, it steals the height too. And it steals the height too, whether you're talking about the pre-outs or the binding posts. It just steals height too to be the bi-amp part of your front, left, and right speakers now. So there's no way to continue having 4 overheads. But you can still have it as 7.2.2. You can still have your front heights going in that scenario. But that's what it would be. You would steal the height 2s to be your bi-amp section if you're using the Denon.
Okay. And again, if you hear a difference, I would check your ears, and then check your biases, and then realize that you don't actually hear a difference. With his current setup, he uses the stereo listening mode for any 2-channel music that keeps his subwoofers active. His front speakers are set to small, and Odyssey's still active, which is all good. He tried switching to direct mode, but it loses a ton of bass, even though his B&W front speakers are rated down to 38 hertz. You're losing 18 hertz to begin with, and they're also in the wrong place, and there's just so many things. So many reasons why we don't do this. Again, he'd just like to experiment. Could he make use of the 2 speaker presets offered by the X3700H? Could he keep his current setup stored as preset 1 and then make a configuration for preset 2 where the front speakers are set to large and the subwoofers are not active at all? He'd be interested in being able to compare just his front speakers playing, but with Odyssey on versus off. Well, that is what pure direct mode does. That's what direct mode does. It turns Odyssey off.
He'd like to be able to have it as the front speaker set to large, no subwoofer, but Odyssey on, which he's not able to do if he just keeps the current setup.
Oh, that's true. Okay.
So
I mean, yeah, you can do that. Again, it's the same thing that what Rob just described. So
absolutely use preset 2 to do this. In that one, you would just configure it as I don't have any subwoofers. And you can absolutely do that. Even though the subwoofers are physically there and physically still connected, you just in the amp assign and in the speaker configuration say, I don't have any subwoofers. And then you can absolutely do this under preset number 2. So having those 2 presets in your case for these experimentation purposes is a real benefit. It's totally going to serve you well.
Yeah. I would be 100% shocked if you came back after this test and went, "Oh yeah, I'm totally doing this."
I don't know, man. Once you get it in your mind, once people get this stuff in their mind, they'll convince themselves.
That's what it comes down to. And again, I don't. Those of you out there who are who do use your speakers, run full range and everything else, and you say that it does sound better for music, I don't care. You know what I mean? You don't have to convince me, and I don't feel the need to convince you. Like I know what I know, and you know what you know, and the fact that they don't match up doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean that I'm right and you're wrong, or you're right and I'm wrong. It just means that in your configuration, in your seat, with your ears, with your speakers, in your room, you think it sounds good. In which case, drink your scotch and enjoy your music and go on with your life. Because in my room and every other room I've ever been in, and in my experience, it's not the case. And that's perfectly fine that you hit the jackpot. And you can look at it that way. Sure. You hit the jackpot with the combination of speakers and room and acoustics and everything else, that in your room, your music sounds better. And I would venture to say it also has a very big, your musical taste has a very big part to play in this as well. So it's fine. It's fine that you feel that way. You're wrong, but it's fine that you sorry.
I look at the sweeps. I come back to the sweeps and I'm like, well, I already set up my subwoofers to handle the bass and play that linearly and uniformly across all my seats. And then I set up my speakers and I've equalized them so that they're as close to linear as I can. And then I go to direct mode, or I turn off my subwoofers and put my front, left, right speakers as full range, Odyssey on or off. And then I look at the sweeps again and I go, oh, those aren't flat lines anymore.
So
now that doesn't mean subjectively you might not like it. You might like the coloration of the sound. That's fine. Right. Subjectively, that's fine. But when you look at the sweeps, they tell it pretty plainly which one is more accurate to the signal versus not. Yeah.
I will tell you this, and I hope Andrew doesn't get mad that I mentioned this, but Andrew's been working with me at AV Gadgets for a while, and I give him articles to write based on either things that I need to have written, and he's willing to do. I mean, I don't pay him, so it doesn't work for me. I mean, I ask him if he wants to do it. You don't pay yourself either, yes. So I don't pay myself either. So there's that. But I also assign an article. I ask him if he wants to write an article on specific things, because it's a topic that he needs to know about in order to more accurately write other articles. And since he started working with me, he sold his DAC, he sold his external amp. He keeps getting rid of all this audiophile equipment that he bought to test. He's like, it's not making a difference. I'm like, of this I am aware, my friend. But he would not have done that because he wasn't, there was no reason. There was no reason for him to question what he was experiencing, and he enjoyed having the gear. But now he's realizing that the gear takes up a lot of room, it's not really doing anything, and it's just money sitting on a shelf doing nothing for him. So it's interesting to see his growth because we have, including me, we've all gone through this sort of cycle of, and I did the same thing. I've talked about this before with cycling, where you go through this arc of I get excited about a thing, I read about a thing, and then I buy into all the hype, and then I start going, wait a second, that doesn't make a lot of sense. And then we get to the other side of it, and you realize, well, I bought a bunch of stuff that I really didn't need. I was told that I needed these things, so I bought these things, and now I'm looking at these things going, they really aren't making any difference. But now that I have them, there's no point in getting rid of them.
If you hear about a thing like bi-amping, external DACs, whatever it might be, and then you go searching for that thing specifically, you're going to find tons of takes that are saying, of course it makes a huge difference and it's absolutely what you need. And how could they sell it for thousands of dollars if it didn't make a huge audible difference? It wouldn't make any sense that it would even exist unless it was this massive improvement. And, like the quote unquote knowledge of the echo chamber that gets passed around, right? You're going to find so much if you search for anything online, you're going to find the for and against. And it becomes a real challenge. So, I mean, we're a bit of an unusual voice in the home theater community, I think. Because, I mean, there's some stuff we defend, like decoupling things, where there's this weird contingent of people online who are like, no, it's complete snake oil. And I'm like, but we have squishy things and pillows that you can put your vibrating phone on. Like, this is not a weird concept to wrap your head around, but it's still out there, So, but whether it's high-end cables or, cable risers or whatever it is, if you get a certain bugaboo in your mind and you go searching for that thing, you're going to find a gazillion people telling you, you absolutely must do it. So I completely get it. I completely get it. But I rely on, like, blind comparisons. Because which is hard. It's very hard. But I mean, that was the most illuminating thing to me, was blind comparisons, because a ton of that stuff, I was into that stuff. I was visiting the forums. I was buying it. I will say for myself, I don't think I bought into as much hype as some people did, but I bought into some of it. I definitely bought into some of it. And once I got a taste of doing blind comparisons, and I was like, and there was that anxiety side to it, which is like, well, now I think I should be able to tell the difference, or I should be able to hear it or see it, whatever the comparison is. And then you get, and you're like, wait, I can't? Like, what's going on? Is it me?
The most astonishing thing that happens when you start in this business from my end, when you're on the review side, is how quickly you realize that getting decent audio is not as hard as everybody seems to think it is. Getting decent audio, getting a decent picture is a very short Google search away, and you don't have to try very hard. And people are like, well, everybody on this forum hates these speakers, but I bought them and they sound fine to me. And I'm like, that's exactly right. I don't know why everybody hates these speakers on this forum, but they do, and they just decided that that's the case. That's the hill they're going to die on. But the reality is, in most cases, no matter what speakers you've bought, as long as you spent over about $500 on a bookshelf or $1,000 on towers, you got something pretty good. It sounds pretty good. And
and then you factor in the room acoustic side of things. It's like, man, could be anything.
So it's like, I spent in the case of me, when I first started, I got Axiom's M22 speakers back when they were a reasonable price, and we're comparing those to so many other speakers, because those were the speakers I had, and those were the speakers I had experience with. Comparing them to a bunch of other speakers, I was like, man, you got to spend a lot of money to get significantly better performance than what I'm getting out of these, what were at the time very budget speakers.
And that's with speakers where we're like, we'll agree, outside of room acoustics is like the one thing you can genuinely tell differences between sunset. But even there, the differences that we imagine we're going to hear between speakers in the blind comparison, they're not nearly as big as you imagine they're going to be.
Well, it's the same thing when people finally do the listening test between like the high bit rate,
the high res
music and everything else, and you're like, I like it, but only when the tests are done properly. But like when they take the high res file and then they down mix it to like an MP3 and they play them side by side, and you're like, I don't know, they kind of sound the same to me.
Even this
sound pretty close.
This 128 kilobit, I'm like, I'm having trouble. I'm struggling. Am I really hearing the difference?
I have to listen to the snare drum. Where's the snare drum? I gotta listen to the snare drum to know.
Then you get to 256 or certainly 320. You're like, I can't tell anymore. Can't tell the difference anymore.
So it's. We make this, and I think this is true throughout many different hobbies and interests out there. We make it much more contentious than it needs to be. I do not begrudge and I have scrolled up, so I don't remember who it is, wanting to try biamping.
Actually, I'm all in favor. Like, you own this equipment. It's in your house. This is stuff that interests you. You want to find out for yourself. I'm completely in favor of it. Don't take our word for it. Try it for yourself. You can, and you can do it non-destructively. That's what he was.
That's right.
He was worried about the non-destructive side of it, because I get that. You're like, I dialed in my system. I don't want to tear it apart just to do this experiment. But that's wonderful. You got the speaker presets.
And he's lucky that has become available to us very recently.
Yeah.
You know, I don't have that availability. I mean, I can save.
If he was one model year prior with the X3600H, you wouldn't have been able to do it this easily.
So, I mean, trying these things out is great. You know, most of us don't have that opportunity, but too often we hear people or see people or experience people who are like, I know that I need this because of what I've read. I'm like, do you really though? Do you really? Are you sure about that? You know, I know that separates are better because, you know, everybody knows that separates are better. I'm like, I don't know that. And I've been doing this a lot longer than you have. So, you know, maybe we can talk about that.
Oxygen-free copper. I mean, it's got to be better.
God.
Just look at it.
Everybody's got to specify that. I bought oxygen-free copper on, you know, speaker cables, and I keep getting this buzzing noise, and then my receiver goes into protection mode. I'm like, it's the speaker cable. No, it's oxygen-free, and it's all terminated with banana plugs. I'm like, you're a liar. Let's start off with that. You are lying. Somewhere in this in here there is something that's touching. Now I don't know how it's touching, but it's touching. And I've already checked my speaker wire 3 times. No, you didn't. If you did, we would no longer have this problem. But there's, you know, they're just okay. I'm done venting right now.
Okay, well, right? I had one last comment, which was just the sort of flip side of it, which is there is the funny thing. If somebody asks me to evaluate something now, like, I can't. It's so much harder for me than when I was new to stuff and eager to give my opinion on things, because, like, if I go and look at a television in a setting, I'm like, I can't tell you anything about this. Like, I didn't control the environment that it's in. I don't have measurement equipment with me. Like, what am I going to tell you? Yeah, it looks pretty good. Like, I can't evaluate. If I go and listen to speakers, I'm like, this is an uncontrolled acoustic environment. I'm not playing the sweeps I normally do. Like, I can't tell you anything about these speakers. You know, like, I've come to that point where I'm like, I actually feel less confident giving my opinion on anything, because I'm like, unless it's really controlled, and that is such a pain. It is such a pain to do the controlled experiments. I'm like, oh, I don't want to do it. I hate testing stuff. It's crazy, right? People listen to this podcast and they're like, you talk about this every week for 2 hours. I'm like, I hate it. I hate testing stuff. I much like.
That's why I stopped doing speaker measurements.
I know,
and display measurements. It's a humongous pain. It does nothing but cause problems with my reviews, and inevitably it comes back down to, well, you heard what you heard, and it's all because of your room anyways, so it doesn't matter, you know. And nothing I say or measure, like, I don't have an anechoic chamber, so that's it. I'm not putting a speaker up on a pole or taking it out to the middle of a field.
And you're not spend $150,000 to go get a Clipple.
So, you know, let's just have fun and experience it and be okay.
Right.
Yeah. It is such a pain to test these things properly. The last time I did, you know, the big blind test and everything else, you know, it was fun, but it was an all-day thing, and nobody left that room happy.
Right, that's right. Whether they came in expecting to tell a bigger difference than they could, so they're, like I say, that anxious feeling about it, or they found out at the end of it they preferred something that all along they had been saying was bad, or vice versa, right? Something they always said was good. They're like, oh, that was actually my least favorite. How did that happen? Yeah. It must be the way you tested it, Tom. You're to blame. You're to blame.
And there's that, and then there's, you know, it was a long day. We all had headaches by the end, and it was just like nobody had any. Like, by the end, we were all like just kind of like, "Is it done yet, Tom?" I'm like, 2 more.
Yeah,
2 more.
Because you've got to get the proper data set, and that's the other thing is like writing. This is why I don't write reviews. I've never been a reviewer. This is why I've stuck to podcasting, because I would much rather take someone else's review and pick apart the 1 or 2 things. I don't want to write the review, because then I have to worry about those 1 or 2 things. I want no part of that. I will be the critic. I won't be the person writing it.
Yeah. Nothing makes people happier than telling them their speakers are just okay. Let me tell you. Nothing makes people really excited to talk to you on the internet like saying, I mean, they were all right. I mean, for the price,
we could just go over to Harman and JBL because they're like, you do all the research and then look at your JBL speakers. Like, what happened? What happened?
Why don't you people talk to each other?
Not JBL Synthesis, not JBL Pro, but just regular consumer JBL I'm talking about. I'm like, what? Where was the disconnect there? What went on?
Certainly, you guys could have put something together better than this. All right, let's finish up here. Who do we have left?
We have Tim and Infinite Gary and Paul. That is on the list for next week.
All right, I want to thank our listeners of the week. I want to thank Jason and Mark for going to avrant.com, click on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link, and leaving us a PayPal donation, as well as our 136 patrons over at patreon.com.
Yes, indeed. Jason and Mark, thank you very much for those PayPal donations. Really do appreciate that financial support. And patreon.com/AVRant podcast is where you can go to sign up for an automatic monthly donation if you'd like to give us one. So a big thank you to our 136 patrons over there.
We also have I want to thank our people for thanking us for keeping the podcast going, including Dale, J, Bret, Todd, Zach, Augie, JR, and Paul. I'm not sure why I got those out of order, but I did. So there you go.
It's because I didn't line separate them this week. So I'll say the names one more time. Dale, J, Todd, Bret, Zach, Augie, JR, and Paul. We do very much appreciate the notes of gratitude and encouragement that you've sent to us. So thank you for that. Thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions.
That's right. If you want to get your question answered on this podcast, all you have to do is ask. Ask us by emailing us at question@avrant.com. For AV Rant, I'm Tom Antry.
And I'm Rob H. Now stay in and listen to something.
Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AV Rant.
Now go out and listen to something.